Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Wilbanks. Jennifer Wilbanks was born on February 28, 1973, in Georgia, where she spent her entire life surrounded by family, friends, and work. It was in Duluth that she met her fiancé, John Mason, who was also 32 years old. John came from a wealthy family that owned a private medical clinic in Duluth. His friends described him as a kind and caring person who was always willing to help those in need. Jennifer and John had been dating for about a year and seemed like the perfect couple. Everyone who knew them was excited when they announced their engagement. The wedding preparations were underway, and a lavish ceremony was planned for April 30, 2005, with several hundred guests invited. However, just 4 days before the wedding, on April 26, 2005, John reported Jennifer's disappearance to the police. He claimed she had gone for an evening run and never returned. John initially tried to find Jennifer on his own but eventually sought help from law enforcement. The next day, April 27, a massive search operation was launched, involving over 300 police officers and volunteers. They combed through the wooded areas and water bodies along the route Jennifer was supposed to run. Given the urgency of the situation, even off-duty police officers were called in to assist. One of the search teams found potential clues, including clothing, sneakers, and a strand of long, dark hair. All of these findings were sent to the lab for examination. Jennifer's family distributed flyers with her picture and posted them around the city, hoping someone might have information about her disappearance. The media picked up the story, and billboards with her image appeared around town. The police searched the home she shared with her fiancé, John, but found nothing suspicious. As the investigation continued, Major Donald Woodruff of the Duluth Police Department announced that Jennifer's disappearance was being treated as a criminal case, with the FBI and Georgia Bureau of Investigation involved. Despite a second day of searching, no signs of Jennifer were found. Her family was shocked and distraught, and they reached out to radio and TV stations to publicize her disappearance, suggesting that she might have been kidnapped and taken out of state. Jennifer's family begged her possible kidnapper to release her. The cable news channels extensively covered the story, raising questions about her disappearance. Jennifer was just 4 days away from her wedding. Her relatives, visibly distraught, made emotional appeals during press conferences and interviews. In this photo, a visibly distressed John Mason is shown comforting his mother-in-law. If you're familiar with true crime stories, you may have already pieced together the events surrounding Jennifer's disappearance. As the last person to see Jennifer alive, John became the subject of suspicion when searches yielded no results. Investigators sought to uncover the truth behind John's wholesome image. To those who knew him, he appeared to be a law-abiding citizen who attended church every Sunday and couldn't harm a fly. He was asked to take a lie detector test, but he declined. Instead, he took a private polygraph test with his lawyer present and gave the results to the police. However, this unusual action only heightened the detective's suspicions about John Mason. The test results did not conclusively determine whether John was involved in his fiancée's disappearance. To investigate potential motives, detectives conducted a thorough search of their home and seized 3 computers. Notably, no signs of a struggle or evidence of a crime were found in the house. On the day before the wedding, Jennifer's family offered a $100,000 reward for information that could help find her, either dead or alive. The police held a press conference to announce that they were ending the active search. According to the police chief, they had exhausted all possible leads in the area and found no clues, leading them to call off the search. John Mason attended the press conference but did not speak to reporters. Jennifer's uncle speculated that John was simply unsure of what to say, which only fueled speculation about his involvement in her disappearance. Initially, the police found some items, including clothes, shoes, and a lock of hair, that they thought might be connected to Jennifer's disappearance. However, further investigation revealed that these items had no link to her case. The only suspect with a potential motive was John, and journalists were closely following him, making it seem likely that he was involved in her disappearance. However, no concrete evidence had been found. The next day, which was supposed to be Jennifer's wedding day, people gathered to pray for her safe return. On the evening of April 29th, John received a mysterious phone call from an unknown number. When he answered, he was shocked to hear Jennifer's voice on the other end. She told him that she had been kidnapped, taken to an unknown location, and forced into a physically intimate situation. She was crying and said that after everything was over, she was released, but now she was lost and didn't know where she was. John was overcome with emotions as he spoke to Jennifer, trying to remain calm to keep her calm as well. He was relieved to know she was alive, but soon, a new development would arise. After talking to John, Jennifer called 911 and reported her alleged kidnapping and release, stating that she was unsure of her location. The police investigation into Jennifer's disappearance led them to a payphone in Albuquerque, New Mexico, over 1,400 miles from her hometown of Duluth, Georgia. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Jennifer, who was reunited with her relieved family. The family praised the efforts of the community and the media, believing their attention had persuaded the supposed kidnapper to release Jennifer. However, during her interview at the police station, authorities noticed discrepancies between Jennifer's account of her ordeal and her actual appearance. She claimed to have been held captive by a man and a woman in their 40s, tied up in a blue van. But when FBI agents questioned her, they found numerous inconsistencies in her story. Confronted with these discrepancies, Jennifer confessed that she had fabricated the entire kidnapping. Jennifer had actually left her fiancé, John, by telling him she was going for a run and instead boarded a bus to New Mexico. She explained that she had been overwhelmed by the pressure of her upcoming wedding and couldn't cope. Further investigation revealed that Jennifer had a history of problematic behavior, with 3 prior charges of shoplifting. Jennifer was involved in several incidents of theft before her infamous kidnapping case. In 1996, she stole $37 worth of goods from Walmart. The following year, at the age of 24, she was accused of stealing $1,740 worth of merchandise from a supermarket. She paid for the damages and completed community service, which led to the theft charges being dropped. However, in 1998, she was caught stealing again, with damages amounting to $98. There were also allegations of theft from families who had hired her as a nanny. These thefts were considered minor, and she managed to avoid imprisonment. After her disappearance and subsequent return, the attention shifted from the thefts to the large-scale search operation conducted by the state of Georgia, which cost nearly $60,000. Jennifer attributed her disappearance to the overwhelming pressure of her impending wedding. With numerous tasks to complete and limited time, she felt stressed and pressured. Authorities later stated that the wedding had become too much for her to handle. Duluth Police Chief Randy Belcher clarified that Jennifer's fiancé was innocent of any involvement in her disappearance, despite initial suspicions. Jennifer Wilbanks, dubbed the Runaway Bride, apologized publicly to her family, friends, and community for her disappearance. When she returned, her fiancé, John Mason, immediately gave her back the engagement ring she had left behind, signifying his ongoing commitment to their relationship. According to Mason, his commitment to Wilbanks was solidified when he proposed and gave her the ring, regardless of their unfinished wedding plans. Following her return, Wilbanks sought medical treatment to address underlying issues that contributed to her escape. However, her troubles persisted, and she was charged with making false statements related to her disappearance. This led to a guilty plea for perjury, resulting in 2 years of probation, 120 hours of community service, and a restitution payment of over $15,000 to the city. The situation took another turn when Wilbanks sued her now ex-fiancé, John Mason, in 2006. They had ended their engagement, and Wilbanks claimed that Mason had exploited her trust during her treatment by selling the rights to their story for $500,000 without her knowledge. He allegedly used the funds to purchase a house, registered solely in his name, and then kicked her out after their breakup. Wilbanks sought $250,000 as compensation for her share of the house and an additional $250,000 in damages. After the failed wedding, John Mason filed a countersuit against Jennifer Wilbanks, claiming he suffered emotional distress from being left at the wedding and suggesting she might have been involved in her own disappearance. In December 2006, both parties dropped their lawsuits, reportedly as part of a settlement. Meanwhile, Jennifer's notoriety caught the attention of global media, making her a temporary celebrity. In the aftermath, several products emerged, such as a runaway bride action figure and a hot sauce called Jennifer's Hightail and Hot Sauce. A musical play based on her story opened in Duluth, Georgia, in March 2008. Even a photo of her fiancé, John Mason, appeared in the house for the 2008 movie The Grand. Eventually, John Mason married another woman in 2008 in a small ceremony at his parents' home. Jennifer also got married in 2010, but her marriage ended after 11 years, and she still resides in Georgia. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maria Munoz. Maria Munoz was born on January 25, 1989, in Puerto Rico to Marisol Rodriguez and Jorge Luis Munoz. She was the middle child of 3, along with her siblings Marisol Munoz and Peter Hernandez. Tragically, Maria's mother passed away when she was young, leaving her to take on a significant caregiving role for her brothers. It was during this time that Maria met Joel Pellet, a nursing student who was 11 years older than her. Despite their age difference, they got married in 2011. After their wedding, they relocated to Laredo, Texas, where Joel landed a high-paying job as a nurse anesthetist at a local hospital. Their new financial stability allowed them to live a life of luxury, complete with expensive cars and exotic vacations. By the time Maria was 31, she had left her job to focus on raising their 2 young sons. As a devoted stay-at-home mom, Maria cherished every moment with her children and supported her husband Joel, who was 40 at the time. Maria was a devoted mother who spent quality time with her children, taking them to the park and reading to them before bed. She also made time for her own interests, like playing the piano. Despite her happiness at home, she harbored a long-held dream of returning to school and becoming a nurse again. From the outside, it seemed like Maria and her husband Pellet had a perfect relationship. He would frequently share photos of his family with friends and colleagues, boasting about how wonderful they were. However, beneath the surface, things started to take a turn in 2018, after Maria gave birth to their second son. Those close to Pellet began to notice a change in his behavior. Pellet underwent a physical transformation, losing weight and gaining muscle. He also became more outgoing and flirtatious with other women, behavior that didn't align with what was expected of a married man. On social media, he started removing photos of his wife and children, replacing them with pictures of himself alone. This new online persona made it seem like he was single and carefree, without the responsibilities of a husband and father. In 2020, Maria's life was turned upside down when she discovered her husband, Pellet, was having an affair with a surgical nurse named Janet Arando. Despite her suspicions, finding airline tickets he had purchased for a trip to Europe with his mistress was the final confirmation of his infidelity. Maria was consumed by heartbreak, depression, and a deep sense of betrayal. She felt lost and alone, struggling to come to terms with the fact that her 10-year marriage was built on lies. To cope with her emotional turmoil, Maria began seeing a therapist, who prescribed medication to support her mental health. As Maria grappled with her emotions, she found solace in writing journals, using them as an outlet to process her thoughts and feelings. However, the situation continued to deteriorate, and on September 19, 2020, Maria confronted her husband's infidelity head-on by visiting Janet's house, where she found Pellet's car parked in the driveway. Maria confronted Pellet at his house, forcing him to choose between her and Janet. He chose Janet, and during the ensuing argument, Janet called the police. However, Maria and Pellet had left by the time the police arrived. The police then called Maria while she was driving with Pellet, and they could hear him yelling at her in the background. When they got home, Pellet's anger escalated, and he punched a hole in Maria's car windshield, displaying a concerning level of force and anger. The next morning, Maria sent Pellet a text message stating her intention to hire a lawyer to help resolve their situation. Pellet replied, suggesting they handle things without lawyers, as he believed it would be too expensive. However, just a few hours later, Pellet appeared to have a change of heart. He sent Maria an emotional email expressing his deep sadness and inner turmoil. He requested a sincere and calm conversation with Maria, free from arguments. Maria agreed to meet with him, and they scheduled a meeting for 5 p.m. the following night. Before meeting her friend Yasmin Martinez, Maria was extremely anxious and messaged her about their plans. Unfortunately, the encounter ended in a terrifying way. On September 22, 2020, Maria's husband, Pellet, frantically called 911, saying his wife might have taken some prescription pills and was not breathing. Officer crews arrived at their house around 1:40 a.m., with his body cam recording the scene. Pellet was found performing CPR on Maria at the top of the stairs near their bedroom, still wearing his green hospital scrubs. Their 2 sons were sleeping nearby. When paramedics arrived, they took over CPR efforts while first responders worked to save Maria's life. An officer asked Pellet about the pills Maria had supposedly taken. He quickly retrieved a bottle from the nearby bathroom medicine cabinet and handed it to the officers. The bottle was later found to contain a prescription for clonazepam, a medication used to treat acute anxiety, panic attacks, and epilepsy. Benzodiazepines, like Kazam, calm the nervous system to produce a relaxing effect. However, when an officer examined the pill bottle, he discovered that it was prescribed to Pellet, not Maria. What caught his attention was that the bottle had been returned to the medicine cabinet, which is unusual in overdose cases, where the bottle is typically found near the person. The officer's body camera footage showed Pellet picking up the pill container from the floor and putting it in his pocket. This raised suspicions, as it seemed like Pellet might be hiding something. Another suspicious finding was a needle catheter on the stairs, which was unusual given the presence of 2 young children in the home. The investigators found even more disturbing evidence: syringes and IV equipment neatly packed in a medical bag. While Pellet's profession as an anesthesia nurse might explain the possession of these tools, their presence outside a clinical setting sparked important questions for the investigators. Pellet told the officers that Maria had been struggling with severe depression and her mental health had been declining. He said she had taken pills to cope with her emotions, but unfortunately, despite the responders' best efforts, she couldn't be revived and was pronounced dead at 3:58 a.m. After Maria's death, the officers questioned Pellet further in the kitchen. He stated that he and Maria had a conversation earlier that day, became intimate, and then he took a shower. When he came out, he found Maria asleep. Pellet went downstairs for an unspecified reason, and when he returned, he found Maria unresponsive and not breathing. The officers observed Pellet's strange behavior, including excessive sweating and his inability to answer simple questions about the incident. The officer noticed that Pellet was sweating excessively, more so than anyone else, including the first responder who had been trying to revive Maria for 2 hours. This heightened suspicion and led to him being taken to the police station for further questioning by Sergeant Liz Mata. At the station, Pellet was left alone in an interrogation room, which was being recorded by video cameras. When officers reviewed the footage, they were astonished to see Pellet's sudden outburst. He began screaming, crying, hitting the walls, and throwing furniture around the room. The commotion was so intense that people in the nearby hallways and rooms were frightened by the loud noises coming from the room. As a result, Sergeant Luis Matt entered the room at 4 a.m. to speak with Pellet. During their conversation, Pellet opened up again about the events surrounding Maria's death. In a shocking revelation, Pellet also confessed to having an affair with a woman named Janet. He revealed that he had left the family home 5 months prior and was living with Janet at the time of Maria's death. He shared that he had been involved with Janet for 2 years, and Maria had been aware of the affair beforehand. On the night Maria died, her husband visited their family home to talk to her about their marriage. After their conversation, they were intimate. He thought she had fallen asleep in her room, but when he checked on her 10 minutes later, he found her unresponsive. The husband confessed to the officer that he had given Maria clonazepam, a medication prescribed to him to help with her anxiety and depression. However, he couldn't provide details about how many pills she had taken or how many were left in the bottle. Despite being questioned, the husband was unable to provide any additional information to help clarify what had happened. He was released, and an autopsy was performed on Maria just 8 hours after her death. The timing of the autopsy meant that any cause of death should still be detectable in her stomach contents. However, the autopsy results revealed a surprise. No traces of pills were found in Maria's stomach. Instead, the medical examiner discovered a small red pinprick mark on the inside of her elbow, which suggested that she may have been injected with something. The discovery of the mysterious mark on Maria's hand led investigators to explore its potential connection to her death. During their investigation, they found a journal in Maria's home, which she had kept to cope with her anxiety and depression. The journal proved to be a crucial piece of evidence, revealing Maria's innermost thoughts and experiences. Investigators learned that Maria loved her husband dearly and wanted to preserve their family, despite his desire to be with someone else. She expressed her desperation to escape her emotional pain, writing, "I want it to stop. My past haunts me, and I don't want to be sad anymore." Through her journal entries, Maria documented the heartbreak she felt when her husband left their home in Laredo, leaving her to care for their 2 young sons alone. The journal, along with recordings on her cell phone, exposed her husband's abusive behavior and chronicled her emotional journey from grief to healing, and eventually, a newfound optimism for the future. Maria Munoz wrote in her journal the day before her death, "What is it that I want? Number 1, move forward." Her journal entries revealed a strong desire to live and move forward with her life, with no mention of suicide or plans to end her life. This led investigators to rule out suicide as a possible cause of death, and they continued to search for answers. Dr. John Hunsinger, Maria's previous employer and an anesthesiologist, became aware of the autopsy findings and contacted the lead detective Cruz. Dr. Hunsinger recommended a comprehensive toxicology screening, which the investigators conducted. In January 2021, the toxicology test results were finally received by investigators Sergeant Luis Matt and Cruz. Contrary to Maria's boyfriend Pellet's claim, Maria did not have clonazepam in her system. The report revealed a surprising discovery: the presence of 7 surgical drugs including morphine, Demerol, Versed, propofol, ketamine, Lian, and Narin. These medications are typically used during surgical procedures, with propofol and ketamine often administered intravenously as sedatives and for pain management. The investigation into Maria's death took a significant turn when toxicology results revealed high levels of propofol in her system. This was shocking because propofol is a highly controlled substance, typically only accessible to medical professionals working in anesthesiology. As a nurse anesthetist, Pellet would have had access to propofol, leading investigators to suspect him. Dr. Hunsinger, who worked with Pellet and had experience with propofol, was stunned by the extreme amount found in Maria's body, the highest he had ever seen. Given Pellet's profession, investigators believed he would know the exact dosage required to sedate or overdose someone. Furthermore, a small mark on Maria's arm suggested she may have been injected with a substance. With the toxicology report, Pellet's suspicious behavior, and Maria's journal, authorities felt they had sufficient evidence to arrest Pellet for Maria's murder. They quickly obtained an arrest warrant, and De La Cruz went to apprehend Pellet, who surprisingly did not resist. He was taken into custody, marking a new phase in the investigation. As police prepared to question him about Maria's death, Pellet would finally face the consequences of his actions. The trial began on March 21, 2023. During the legal proceedings, both the prosecution and defense presented their arguments. The prosecution team, an all-female group referred to as Maria's team, used Maria Munoz's personal journal entries to build a strong case against the defendant Pellet. This evidence helped to portray Maria as a devoted wife and mother to the jury. Prosecutors portrayed Maria as a loving, intelligent, and vibrant individual, evident through her personal journal. They alleged that her husband, Pellet, drugged her by slipping substances into her drink, causing her to become unconscious. While she was incapacitated, they claimed he injected propofol into her arm. The prosecutors also suspected that Pellet deliberately delayed calling 911, ensuring that emergency responders would be unable to revive Maria upon arrival. The prosecutors believed Maria's journals provided insight into the challenges she faced, fueling their determination to seek justice for her. During the final arguments, Pellet's lawyer, Roberto Bali, claimed his client wanted to reconcile with Maria before her death. Bali pointed to the medical examiner's report, which stated that Maria's cause of death remained uncertain, and argued that there was insufficient evidence to prove Pellet's responsibility in her death. Bali highlighted a crucial detail. Pellet had given Maria a drug called Narun, commonly used to reverse overdoses, on the night she died. Bali also revealed that both Pellet and Munoz struggled with drug addiction. Furthermore, he argued that Maria had willingly taken the drugs without being forced, as there were no signs of force on her body. However, an investigation into Maria's social circles, friends, and family revealed that she was not a drug addict. In fact, Pellet was the only person who could have supplied her with the large amount of propofol found in her system. The authorities managed to convince Pellet's girlfriend, surgical nurse Janet Arredondo, to testify against him. She disclosed that Pellet had admitted to giving Maria something to calm her down and confirmed that he had brought drugs, including propofol, home from work. The jury delivered a verdict in under an hour, finding Pellet guilty of murdering his wife, Maria, after a 9-day trial on March 30, 2023. On April 27, 2023, Pellet received a life sentence for the murder conviction, plus an additional 10 years and a $10,000 fine for tampering with evidence. As of now, Joel Pellet is serving his life sentence at a Texas Department of Criminal Justice, facing the consequences of his heinous actions. His imprisonment serves as a testament to accountability and a tribute to Maria's life, ensuring that her memory is honored through the pursuit of truth and justice. The reason behind Joel Pellet's brutal act of killing his wife, Maria Munoz, is not entirely clear. However, according to the prosecution, it is believed that he was driven by a desire to end his marriage and start a new life with his girlfriend, Janet Arredondo. Regardless of the motive, Pellet's actions were inexcusable and justice had to be served. The jury's verdict has brought a sense of closure to this tragic case, confirming that heinous crimes like this will not be tolerated. The conviction serves as a powerful reminder that those who commit such atrocities will face the full weight of the law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Mary Catherine Higdon. Mary Catherine Higdon was born in 1994. Mary was a lively and cheerful child who loved making people laugh with her humor, impressions, and playful antics. She had a special bond with her pet frog, which she'd often take on walks around town. Mary was an outdoorsy person who enjoyed exploring nature and appreciating its beauty. She was also passionate about performing, often putting on shows for her family that showcased her creativity and imagination. Her family saw great potential in her and thought she had a bright future ahead. As she grew older, Mary developed a strong interest in firearms. She learned to handle guns responsibly and appreciated their power. She became a skilled marksman and continued to develop her skills. During her high school years, Mary met her partner, Stephen Freeman, who would become the love of her life. Stephen was born on January 1st, 1995, in Griffin, Georgia, where he grew up with his parents and brother. He had a happy childhood, surrounded by a loving family and many friends who described him as laid-back, kind, and helpful. Stephen enjoyed spending time outdoors and exploring nature. Stephen was particularly close to his parents, but he shared a special bond with his mother. When she graduated from college after returning to school, Stephen wrote her a heartfelt letter expressing his admiration for her achievement. In the letter, he praised her hard work and determination, saying he looked up to her every day and loved her more than words could say. Stephen had immense respect and appreciation for his mother, which was clear in the way he spoke about her. After meeting in high school, Stephen and Mary Catherine formed a strong bond, united by their passion for outdoor activities like hiking, camping, fishing, and hunting. Their shared love of nature became the foundation of their robust relationship. After graduating from high school, the couple decided to take the next step by moving in together in Griffin, Georgia. Living together in their own space thrilled Mary Catherine and Stephen. What's more, Stephen's mother welcomed Mary Catherine into their family, treating her like a daughter. Every Sunday, the couple would visit Stephen's parents for a big family dinner, a tradition that brought them all closer together and solidified Mary Catherine's place within the family. Stephen's friends were initially hesitant about his relationship with Mary Catherine, but as they got to know her better, they began to appreciate her positive influence on Stephen's life. They saw how happy and joyful she made him, and they admired her enthusiasm for the outdoors. Stephen and Mary Catherine had different occupations. Stephen worked as a metal worker, specializing in roof repairs. Mary Catherine, on the other hand, had two part-time jobs. She worked as a teacher's assistant at St. George's Episcopal School, a preschool in Milner, Georgia. Additionally, she was employed at a sporting goods store where she sold guns. Interestingly, one of Stephen's close friends, Thomas Skinner, was also a colleague of Mary Catherine's at the sporting goods shop. Mary Catherine learned about basic gun safety while working at a sporting goods store, which taught her how to properly hold, load, and shoot a gun. Similarly, Stephen was enthusiastic about firearms and owned several shotguns and rifles that he used for hunting and target practice. He also kept a Glock 42 handgun at home for self-protection. After 5 years together, Mary Catherine and Stephen were still living in their apartment in Griffin, Georgia, by the summer of 2018. However, their relationship took a tragic turn on August 1st when Mary Catherine made a distressing 911 call, marking the end of their high school romance. Mary Catherine frantically called the dispatcher, screaming that she had accidentally just shot her boyfriend. The police quickly responded to the emergency call and arrived at the apartment shared by Mary Catherine and Stephen. They found Mary Catherine in a state of panic, crying and hyperventilating as she knelt beside Stephen's motionless body. She repeatedly wailed that she could not lose him, her voice filled with anguish and desperation. As the police carefully moved Mary Catherine away from Stephen, they were able to assess his condition. They discovered that he had been shot in the chest, but miraculously, he was still alive. The police immediately called for an ambulance to rush Stephen to the nearest hospital. At the emergency room, a team of skilled doctors worked to save Stephen's life. Despite their best efforts, his condition continued to worsen. Unfortunately, The severity of his injury ultimately proved fatal, and Stephen succumbed to his wounds. After Stephen was taken to the hospital, Mary Catherine accompanied the police to the station for a formal interview. Mary Catherine explained what happened on the night she accidentally shot Stephen. She said she was giving him the gun because he normally kept it beside his bed for safety. However, she clarified that they never loaded the chamber of their guns at home. During the police questioning, officers detected the smell of alcohol on Mary Catherine's breath. As they pressed her for more information, her story changed. Initially, she said she handed Stephen the gun, but later claimed she tossed it to him. The police was skeptical of her changing story, knowing that a gun wouldn't fire randomly just because it was tossed. Someone had to pull the trigger. The police investigation revealed that Mary Catherine must have been pointing the gun directly at Stephen's body for the bullet to have struck where it did, given the location of his gunshot wound. During her interview, Mary Catherine admitted, "I did it out of anger." But unfortunately, the recording equipment malfunctioned at that exact moment, and her words were inaudible. Despite the missing recording, the police still had strong evidence pointing to Mary Catherine's intention to harm Stephen. At the couple's apartment, they found signs of an intense argument, including scattered food throughout the house. Additionally, police records showed that officers had responded to 5 domestic disturbance calls at the couple's residence in the past year. The police also discovered that the gun used in the shooting was loaded on the night of the incident, contradicting Mary Catherine's claims. These findings collectively led the police to conclude that Mary Catherine had intentionally shot her boyfriend Stephen. The police found cooking grease residue on the gun and magazine, leading them to believe Mary Catherine, who was cooking dinner at the time, had loaded the weapon. After Mary Catherine shot Stephen, the police questioned his friends to learn more about their relationship. According to his friends, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship was marked by constant fighting and toxicity. They reported that the couple frequently had intense, heated arguments. Mary Catherine was described as possessive and verbally abusive towards Stephen, with signs of mental instability that heightened the tension between them. Whenever Stephen tried to create distance by leaving their apartment, Mary Catherine would barrage him with relentless texts and calls, forcing him to block her. One of Stephen's friends revealed that Stephen had confided in him about Mary Catherine's history of threatening him with a gun. Specifically, she had pulled a firearm on him at least 3 times in the past. Despite this, Stephen chose not to report these incidents to the authorities because he was worried about Mary Catherine getting into trouble. Stephen's friends stressed that his top priority was always Mary Catherine's well-being, even when it put his own safety at risk. When Stephen's friends learned that Mary Catherine had accidentally shot him, they were skeptical because they knew she was knowledgeable about handling firearms. In fact, just 3 months prior to the shooting, Stephen had texted a friend to say that Mary Catherine was running wild outside, screaming and attempting to shoot both him and herself. Stephen told a friend that Mary Catherine had previously pointed a gun at him, but the latest time, her eyes frightened him, making him think she might actually pull the trigger. By July 2018, Stephen was exhausted with Mary Catherine's behavior and considered leaving her. In July, Stephen planned to secretly move to another town while Mary Catherine was out, without telling her. He was afraid of how she might react if she knew he was leaving. Just 2 days before Mary Catherine fatally shot Stephen, the police found a series of revealing text messages from July 30th. The conversation started with Stephen sending Mary Catherine a friendly message. "Good morning, beautiful. Don't forget." Mary Catherine responded with, "Have a great day." Stephen replied, "You too, love you." However, the night of July 31st, Stephen avoided Mary Catherine's texts and calls, as they were in the middle of a fight, and instead spent the evening at a friend's house. On the night of August 1st, Mary Catherine was at home preparing dinner when she realized Stephen wasn't there. she contacted Stephen's mother, who told her that he was with his friend. Angry and feeling betrayed, Mary Catherine drove to his friend's house, determined to confront Stephen. When she arrived, she saw Stephen sitting in the passenger seat of his friend's truck. Mary Catherine pulled up alongside and began yelling at Stephen, who tried to calm her down, promising to come home soon. Although Stephen's friends claimed that Mary Catherine had pointed a gun at Stephen on multiple occasions, Mary Catherine vigorously denied these allegations. She maintained that she never pulled a gun on Stephen. However, Mary Catherine did admit to having threatened to take her own life with a gun on several occasions. In a later interview, Stephen's mother shared her insight, believing that one of the main reasons Stephen stayed with Mary Catherine for so long was because she frequently threatened to harm herself. Stephen was afraid that Mary Catherine would follow through on her threats if he decided to leave her. However, on the night of the incident that led to Stephen's shooting, Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen was the one who became aggressive and violent. According to her, Stephen threw the dinner she had prepared in her face. Mary Catherine stated that she only picked up the gun to defend herself and scare Stephen away. She wanted him to leave the apartment, but Stephen allegedly lunged at her, which frightened her. As she backed away, the next thing she knew, Stephen was bleeding from the chest. At the time of the shooting, Mary Catherine didn't tell the police her version of events because she was embarrassed to admit that Stephen had a history of violence towards her. She claimed that Stephen had hit her in the past and was controlling. She even recalled an incident where Stephen kicked her out of bed with such force that she hit her head on the door frame. However, Stephen's friends had a different perspective on their relationship. They claimed to have witnessed Mary Catherine being physically aggressive towards Stephen, stating that she had slapped him hard in the face. Mary Catherine's sister contradicted her account of their relationship, revealing that she had seen bruises on Mary Catherine's arm 2 weeks before Stephen was killed. When questioned, Mary Catherine confided in her sister that Stephen had grabbed her, causing the injuries. After investigating Stephen's death as a murder, the authorities charged Mary Catherine with murder, aggravated assault, and firearm possession during a felony. The prosecution offered her a plea deal, proposing a life sentence with possible parole if she pleaded guilty. However, Mary Catherine declined the offer, opting to stand trial and assert her innocence. At the trial, Mary Catherine maintained that she shot Stephen in self-defense, denying the charges against her. The trial, which began on June 17, 2019, nearly a year after Stephen's death, exposed the tumultuous relationship between Mary Catherine and Stephen. Mary Catherine's lawyers argued that she acted out of genuine fear, citing Stephen's history of violence and abuse. Mary Catherine testified that she was the victim of Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and dangerous behavior, which included physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual abuse. She described being hit, humiliated, and degraded by Stephen on multiple occasions, and shared specific incidents where he smacked her around and verbally abused her. Mary Catherine explained that Stephen's constant threats and abuse left her feeling trapped, fearful for her life, and constantly walking on eggshells to avoid triggering his anger. She presented evidence in the form of text messages, including one where Stephen threatened to punish her, which she said meant he would physically harm her. Another text message showed Stephen's explicit threat to hit her back twice as hard if she defended herself. Mary Catherine's defense team also presented messages that supported her allegations of sexual assault, including a text where Stephen mentioned his red room, which she described as a place where they engaged in violent and aggressive intercourse. Mary Catherine testified that Stephen sexually assaulted her on 2 occasions, including one after they returned from a vacation to Walt Disney World, where he allegedly ignored her pleas to stop and intensified his efforts instead. The defense presented over 60 pages of text messages from Stephen, which showcased his pattern of verbal assaults and threatening behavior towards Mary Catherine. These messages included disturbing images and captions, such as one showing Stephen holding a dead fish, accompanied by the caption, "This is you." Another message showed Stephen's violent threats towards Mary Catherine after she cheated on him, where he wrote, "I'm going to wreck you for wrecking me." The defense also alleged that Stephen's drug and alcohol addiction contributed to his violent outbursts. Mary Catherine maintained that she was the one who ended the relationship, not Stephen, and that her actions on the night she shot him were a result of her desperation to escape the abuse. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had reacted violently to some news and had threatened to attack her, causing her to defend herself by grabbing a gun. She said the last thing she had told him before shooting was to get out of her house. However, Stephen's friends and family disputed Mary Catherine's allegations, describing Stephen as a friendly and caring person. Stephen's mother said she was unaware of any threatening messages her son had sent Mary Catherine and did not condone such behavior. Although she acknowledged that Stephen may have said some angry things, she believed he did not mean them. In court, the prosecution questioned Mary Catherine about her story, pointing out that she had never reported any alleged abuse by Stephen. They also presented evidence that Mary Catherine had searched for violent and explicit content online just hours before the shooting, which she claimed was to find ways to make Stephen happy. The prosecution argued that Mary Catherine had changed her story about the shooting multiple times, and that a text from Stephen suggested she had pointed a gun at him before. Additionally, Stephen's friends testified that they had witnessed Mary Catherine's violent behavior towards him. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Mary Catherine not guilty of murder, assault, and other charges. The verdict surprised Stephen's loved ones, who felt that justice had not been served. Later, the jurors revealed that they believed Mary Catherine had intentionally killed Stephen, but there was not enough evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. This lack of evidence made it difficult to determine whether the shooting was murder or self-defense. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Cody Johnson. At the age of 23, Cody was looking for a long-term partner. He confided in his friends about his desire to marry a woman who shared his values, specifically someone from a religious background. On Halloween 2011, he met Jordan, who would eventually become a pivotal figure in his life. Born in August 1991, Jordan grew up in Kalispell in a deeply religious family. She attended the Faith Baptist Church, where she worked with children and families, and her ultimate goal was to become a stay-at-home mother. When Cody and Jordan first met on Halloween, they quickly formed a connection. Although initially shy, Jordan opened up to Cody about her dreams of starting a family and her love for nature. Cody was smitten, but Jordan, who was only 20 at the time, was not ready for a serious relationship. They went on a few casual dates, but maintained a platonic relationship. However, Cody's feelings for Jordan only intensified, and he made a concerted effort to win her over. He joined her church, First Baptist, and began to socialize with her friends and community. Before long, their friendship blossomed into something more. Cody and Jordan officially started dating in November 2011, and Cody became completely enamored with her, wanting to spend all his time with her. Cody was convinced he wanted to marry Jordan just weeks into their relationship, despite her desire to remain chaste until marriage. Those close to they noticed Jordan didn't seem as invested in Cody as he was in her. While some attributed this to her shy nature, others were concerned about the imbalance in their relationship. They rarely showed affection in public, didn't hold hands, and didn't flirt. So, when Cody proposed in December 2012, many of Jordan's friends were surprised she accepted. They thought she wasn't ready for marriage after just a year of dating, but they were happy for her. Jordan eagerly shared her engagement ring on Instagram, captioning the post, "He proposed. Best early Christmas present ever." The wedding was set for June 29, 2013, and planning began immediately. Cody was heavily involved, along with Jordan's best friend and matron of honor, Kimberly Martinez. However, it was Jordan who seemed most enthusiastic about the wedding planning, even going so far as to perform a song with custom-written lyrics by Elizabeth Shee, which would later seem eerily prophetic. When someone, including Kimberly, brought up the idea of actually being married to Cody, Jordan's mood would quickly deteriorate. She repeatedly questioned Kimberly, her matron of honor, about whether she was making the right decision. On her wedding day, Jordan's true feelings about the marriage were evident. She was anxious and avoided eye contact with Cody, frequently looking down. Despite regaining her composure for the wedding photos and first dance, Jordan's unease persisted. The morning after the wedding, Jordan confided in a friend via text from their honeymoon hotel room. She revealed that she had not consummated the marriage and had rejected Cody's advances, not only on their wedding night, but for the next 6 nights as well. Jordan was anxious about Cody's expectations and didn't want to be intimate. She planned to use the excuse that her period had started, hoping it would work, as she feared being forced into something would cause her to panic. Jordan had an intense fear of sex due to her faith and reservations about Cody, causing her to feel anxious about intimacy with him. This anxiety reached a boiling point on July 7th, 8 days after their wedding, when Cody canceled his golfing trip with friends at the last minute because Jordan had planned a surprise for him. After attending church and spending some time alone on the lake, they had dinner with friends at Dairy Queen. Cody then went home with Jordan, and this was the last time anyone saw him. When Cody failed to show up for work, his co-worker Cameron Fredrickson became concerned. As a reliable and punctual employee, Cody's absence was unusual. Cameron decided to visit Cody's new house, which he had purchased with Jordan before their wedding. After knocking with no response, Cameron let himself in and searched the house for any clues about their disappearance. However, he found nothing. Cameron's concern turned to fear when he discovered Cody's phone in the garage. It was unusual for Cody to be without his phone, and this sparked grave concerns. After making several calls, Cameron learned that no one had seen Cody since dinner at Dairy Queen at 8:30. He immediately went to the police station to file a missing persons report, and the authorities took the case seriously from the start. Officer Chaz Zimmerman, one of the first to question Cameron, was struck by his distress. Zimmerman found it odd that Cameron's boss, not his wife Kimberly, reported him missing. Later that day, Kimberly finally reached Jordan, who claimed that Cameron had left with friends in a black car with Washington plates. According to Jordan, Cameron had received a disturbing phone call at the restaurant, so she gave him space. However, that night, Kimberly retrieved her phone charger from their car and discovered a text from Cody. The message stated that Cameron had planned to go for a ride with out-of-town friends who were visiting. Cody was unclear about the friends' identities, but Cameron always took his visiting friends to Glacier Park. Jordan told the police that she didn't recognize the men who were involved in Cody's disappearance, and that they hadn't fought that night. She suggested that Cody might have gone joyriding with his friends from out of town as a possible reason for his disappearance. When questioned about why she didn't report Cody missing, Jordan explained that she didn't want to upset him by filing a report if he was planning to return within a few hours. However, as the hours turned into days, Cody's friends and family gathered at the family home, expressing confusion over his sudden disappearance. It didn't seem like something Cody would do, leaving his wife without a word. Jordan maintained her story until Kimberly confronted her about it. As the conversation continued, Jordan became increasingly uncomfortable. Eventually, she became so agitated that she threw her wedding ring across the room. While some thought this was just her unusual way of coping with the situation, Kimberly was convinced that Jordan was hiding something. The next day, she returned home and called her friend. Meanwhile, Jordan was summoned to the police station, where she was confronted by officers about the inconsistencies in her story. One of the officers said, "Jordan, I've gathered information that contradicts what you're telling me. I've spoken to several people, and it's crucial that I know you're being honest." Jordan responded, "I understand, and I think there's more to the story." Around the same time, Sher Johnson met with the police, armed with Cody's phone records from the day he vanished. She was worried about her son and hoped that the mysterious man Cody had called could provide some clues about his disappearance. However, it turned out that the mysterious caller was simply a friend returning a tool to Cody. The police quickly ruled him out as a suspect because he had a solid alibi. His wife was in labor at the time of Cody's disappearance. With all other leads exhausted, the police refocused their attention on Jordan. It was clear that she was hiding something, but her story didn't quite add up. On July 10th, a crucial breakthrough emerged in the case. An unexpected email arrived from Carmen Tony 607, claiming that Cody was dead and there was no need to continue searching. The message read, "Hello, Jordan. My name is Tony. There is no bother looking for Cody anymore. He is gone." Jordan showed the email to Hannah, remaining expressionless as he relayed the news. According to the email, Cody had supposedly died after falling off a cliff in Glacier National Park while with unknown companions. Hannah was devastated upon reading the message and urged Jordan to report it to the police immediately. Hannah recalled her reaction. "I was freaking out, asking what was going on. I read the email and it said Cody was gone." Jordan didn't show any emotion, didn't even cry. "She just handed me the email and I started shaking. I told her to go to the police, and she did, but I was rushing her, saying, 'Go, move, what are you doing?'" Detective Corey Clark was frustrated that the investigation was ongoing, and an anonymous email hadn't provided the closure they needed. In fact, the email seemed suspiciously convenient, at providing the exact information they'd been searching for and advising them to call off the search. What bothered Clark more than the email's content was Jordan's reaction, or lack thereof. She seemed completely unfazed by the news, which implied her husband's death. Jordan's behavior became even more peculiar when she organized a trip to Glacier National Park with her friends and family to search for Cody. According to Hannah, Jordan was strangely chipper during the entire drive to the park, waving her hand out the window as they went. Despite finding nothing on the first day, they resumed their search on the second day, and it was then that Jordan suddenly claimed to have found Cody's body. Her announcement was met with skepticism. "I think he's down there," she said, leaving Clark wondering why on earth Cody would be in that location. It's baffling that someone would do such a thing. This wall serves a purpose, after all. The autopsy revealed that the victim's head and arms suffered the most damage from the fall. Cody's loved ones were heartbroken over his death, but Jordan felt a sense of relief, according to Hannah. Now that a body had been found, the authorities would finally close the case. However, there was still a major issue. The police had no idea who man Tony 607 was. When Jordan was first questioned about the mysterious message, she directed the police to Tony Stallcup, a fellow car enthusiast and acquaintance of Cody's. Although Tony hadn't seen Cody in several months, he was so worried about him that he gave the police full access to his accounts. The police were unable to find the email address they were looking for, and Jordan and Cody's phone records did not provide much information. As a result, they had to contact Google to obtain the IP address associated with Carmen Tony 607. While waiting for this information, the police re-interviewed Cody's family and friends. During these interviews, Kimberly finally shared with the police Jordan's fragile mental state leading up to her marriage to Cody. She had expressed doubts and fears about marrying him, asking Kimberly multiple times if she should go through with the wedding. Jordan confided in Kimberly about her horror and fear of having sex with Cody, even regretting that Ed had married him and wishing she could undo everything. When Kimberly advised Jordan to be honest with Cody about her feelings, Jordan responded, "I should be happy, but I'm not. If I tell him, it's going to break his heart." 2 days before Cody's disappearance, Jordan typed a disturbing message. "He held me down the other night, and he was in my face." On July 7th, the police discovered another revealing exchange, in which Jordan intended to talk to Cody, but was terrified of his reaction. Jordan went to her friend Kim's house later that day and recounted her conversation with Cody, which didn't go well. Cody became enraged, and she left to give him space, eventually spending the night at her step-parents' house. When the police learned about this, they became more suspicious of Jordan. Around the same time, they received information from Google that linked the email address CarmenTony67 to her stepfather's computer. Although a brief interview with each member of the Graham family suggested Jordan was behind the email, it wasn't conclusive evidence. However, cell phone records and security cameras painted a clearer picture. The records showed that Cody and Jordan's phones were in the vicinity of Glacier National Park on the night of Cody's disappearance. Security cameras even captured them entering the park at 9:17 p.m. Despite Jordan's initial denial of being with Cody that night, the evidence suggested otherwise. On July 18, 2013, the police brought Jordan in for questioning and presented her with the evidence. She broke down in tears and finally revealed her version of events from July 8th. According to Jordan, she confessed her marital doubts to Cody, leading to a massive argument. Jordan and her friend decided to take a trip to Glacier National Park and went to the Loop Trail. Jordan explained what happened next in her own words. If her friend hadn't intervened, Cody would have fallen face first down the hill. The detectives asked her, why did she turn around and push him? Jordan believed it was because her emotions were overwhelming at the time. She felt immense pressure, anger, and every other emotion all at once. The detectives were interested in her comment about a blindfold, as they suspected a connection to a stray scarf found near the crime scene. However, Jordan didn't provide any further information, and it was eventually proven to be unrelated. Jordan claimed that Cody's death was an accident, and that she didn't plan the assault in any way. Jordan explained that she hadn't planned to kill her husband, Cody. The situation escalated, and in the heat of the moment, she pushed him off the bridge. When asked about the incident, Jordan admitted that Cody had turned his back to her, facing the cliff, and she pushed him with both hands. She also confessed to creating a fake identity, Carmen Tony, and sending messages from her stepfather's house. Despite her confession, the police didn't charge Jordan that day, and she walked out of the station a free woman. However, they later arrested her at Cody's funeral on July 22nd, after she was seen texting on her phone, displaying a lack of respect that eroded any remaining sympathy for her. Rumors circulated that Jordan had killed Cody to escape their marriage without the embarrassment of divorce. Her behavior at the funeral, including texting, seemed to confirm these suspicions, implying that she was more concerned about herself than mourning Cody's death. Jordan's motives were called into question, as people wondered if she ever truly loved Cody. She was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and making false statements. After reviewing the evidence, the jury added premeditated first-degree murder to the list of charges. Her trial began on December 9, 2013. From the start, the prosecution aggressively challenged Jordan's story, raising doubts and inconsistencies. They questioned why she lied to Cody's friends and family, and whether she was truly remorseful or innocent. The prosecution's questioning was relentless, and Jordan's situation looked increasingly dire. The testimonies from Cody's loved ones further damaged Jordan's case, portraying her as a heartless wife who murdered her husband to avoid intimacy. Her defense team attempted to argue self-defense, but it seemed unlikely to succeed. Faced with the possibility of a worse outcome, Jordan opted for a plea deal, accepting a 30-year prison sentence without parole in exchange for the prosecution dropping the first-degree murder charge. Before Jordan was sentenced, she tried to withdraw her guilty plea when she learned the prosecution intended to pursue a charge of premeditated first-degree murder, which carried a maximum 50-year sentence. The decision was up to District Judge Donald Malloy, who had to decide whether to accept her original plea or start a new trial. On December 13, 2013, Judge Malloy sentenced Jordan Lynn Graham to 30 years and 5 months in prison. Despite Jordan's attempt to reverse her plea, her case was not reopened or re-examined. The federal prosecution aimed to set a precedent with her case, sending a message that anyone who commits murder under federal jurisdiction will face swift and severe punishment. As a result, Jordan will not be released from prison until she is over 52 years old. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sandra Cantu. Sandra Cantu was an 8-year-old girl who lived with her mother, Maria Chavez, and their family in the Orchard Estates mobile home park in Tracy, California. Despite her parents being separated, Sandra remained close to her father and enjoyed a positive relationship with him. Sandra was a friendly and energetic child who loved playing with her friends in the neighborhood. She was known for her bright smile and optimistic outlook, making her a favorite among her peers and the adults who knew her. At the time, she was a second-grade student at Melville S. Jacobson Elementary School. On March 27, 2009, Sandra returned home from school around 2 p.m. and went out to play with her friends. Her mother, Maria, usually let her play outside until dinner time. However, when Sandra failed to return home by 7 p.m., Maria began to worry. Maria tried to locate Sandra by calling her friends, but none of them had seen her. She then drove around the neighborhood, asking people if they had seen Sandra, but no one had any information. At 7:53 p.m., Maria called 911 to report her daughter missing. The Tracy Police Department quickly responded to the mobile home park and launched a search operation. They asked Maria to describe Sandra's clothing, which included a pink Hello Kitty shirt, black leggings, and Hannah Montana flip-flops. The police then went door to door, questioning neighbors and showing Sandra's picture to gather information. The search for Sandra was a large-scale operation that involved the FBI, cadaver dogs, helicopters, and a team of volunteers. The police showed Sandra's photos to everyone in the community, hoping to find any leads. However, their initial efforts yielded no results. Police are worried, as Sandra always followed safety rules when leaving with her family. They suspect someone familiar might have lured her. Initially, they suspect her father Daniel, who hadn't seen her in a long time, and was in a financial dispute with her mother Maria. However, he's eventually cleared. The police then focus on an unfamiliar ice cream vendor and Frank Waller, a rumored pedophile who allegedly kissed Sandra 2 years prior. Frank admits to being attracted to young girls, but is eventually eliminated. Authorities will continue to monitor him. As the search continues, the community supports Maria. During a vigil, a neighbor finds a disturbing handwritten note near a mailbox and shares it with the officers. A cryptic message was discovered, stating, "Cantu locked in stolen suitcase, thrown in water on Boucher Road and Whitehall Road. Witness." The note's spelling mistakes and suspicious appearance raised questions about its authenticity and the intentions of its writer. Investigators needed more information and decided to interview Melissa, Sandra's neighbor and a Sunday school teacher at her grandfather's church. Melissa explained that she had recently gone through a divorce and a breakup, and now lived with her grandparents and her 5-year-old daughter. Sandra and her sisters often visited Melissa's trailer to play with her daughter, which created a close bond between the two families. When Melissa was questioned, she admitted that she didn't notice anything unusual when she found the note, and she allowed the FBI to search her car. Inside the glove compartment, they found a note with scribbled words, suggesting someone tried to conceal the message. The note was sent for further analysis, and Melissa was released. Weeks passed without any sign of Sandra, but her case took a shocking turn when her body was found inside a black suitcase in an irrigation pond. The suitcase had floated to the surface after the pond was filled 2 weeks prior. Sandra's body was identified by the clothes she was wearing, and an autopsy revealed that she had many cuts and wounds. The suitcase was locked and had an extra cord securing it, indicating that the killer wanted to keep it closed for a longer time. The grim discovery left everyone in shock and horror. The farmer who found the suitcase, Jose Luis Franco, was rewarded $20,000 for alerting the authorities. The autopsy revealed that Sandra had been severely assaulted, with no signs of biological fluids, but indications of an unknown object being used. The cause of death was asphyxiation, and a high dose of alprazolam was found in her system, suggesting she had been drugged. The official cause of death was ruled as homicidal asphyxiation. Tragically, it was determined that Sandra had been murdered just hours after she was last seen on surveillance footage, sending shockwaves through the community. The investigation revealed that Sandra's killer was not a random abductor, but someone she knew. The police pieced together a profile of their potential suspect. A white male, aged between 25 and 40, with a history of sexual assault or possessing child abuse material. The investigation took a surprising turn when a neighbor reported seeing a dark purple, two-toned SUV near the irrigation pond on the day Sandra disappeared. The car's unusual color and unfamiliarity in the area raised suspicions, and the neighbor's description matched a woman named Melissa Huckabee. Surveillance cameras showed Melissa getting into her SUV near Sandra's house around 3:30 p.m. and then driving towards her own house. She was later seen near the pond around 5:30 p.m. This timeline placed Melissa in the area around the time Sandra went missing, making her a prime suspect. However, when the police approached Melissa, they found that she had attempted suicide by ingesting razor blades and was hospitalized. When questioned later, Melissa claimed she was unaware of what had transpired and had only brought a note to the attention of the authorities. She denied any involvement in Sandra's murder. The police investigated Melissa's alibi and found that her phone records were crucial evidence. Earlier, Melissa had reported a theft to the police, claiming that her suitcase was stolen from her driveway around 4 p.m. She even sent a text message to Maria, mentioning the stolen suitcase. This was significant because the suitcase found with Sandra's body matched the one Melissa reported stolen. Despite the evidence, the authorities wanted more information, so they wiretapped Melissa's phone and waited for her hospital release. When she was released, they were shocked to discover that she had called the Canto family. Melissa invited one of Sandra's siblings to her home, but when the police responded, they found no children, suggesting that Melissa might have been planning to lure another child to her house. A neighbor then came forward, revealing that Melissa had taken a 7-year-old girl to the park without permission, and she was found to have been drugged with benzodiazepines, the same drug found in Sandra's body. The police suspicion of Melissa grew, and they discovered a notebook in her trailer with handwriting matching the note she claimed to have found. They also found a cryptic note in her car and a drug prescribed to her that matched the one in Sandra's body. During a search of her grandparents' church, they found a rolling pin with blood that matched Sandra's DNA profile and a window blind missing a drawer cord, which matched the cord used to secure the suitcase. This led to Melissa's arrest on suspicion of kidnapping and murder. Melissa Huckabee, a California woman, has been accused of killing 8-year-old Sandra Cantu and faces multiple charges, including sexual assault. Authorities do not expect to make any further arrests in the case. When questioned by investigators, Huckabee initially denied any involvement, but later claimed that Sandra's death was an accident. She said she was playing a game of hide-and-seek with Sandra and her own daughter, and Sandra agreed to hide in a suitcase. Huckabee claimed she forgot Sandra was inside and only remembered when she arrived at a church, finding Sandra's lifeless body. Huckabee eventually confessed to zipping Sandra into the suitcase and leaving her there until it was too late. She then dumped the suitcase containing Sandra's body into a nearby pond. Further investigation into Huckabee's personal life revealed a troubled past, including criminal activities, depression, and other mental health issues. She had a history of theft convictions and had filed for bankruptcy due to credit card debt and medical expenses. Huckabee's family members, including her father and ex-husband, described her as struggling with depression and having issues with her self-image. Despite this, they said she was not prone to violent behavior. Huckabee is currently under suicide watch and faces multiple charges related to Sandra's death. The trial of Melissa Huckabee began on April 14th. During the proceedings, she became emotional when the prosecution described her criminal actions. She closed her eyes and struggled to hold back tears. Prosecutor Thomas Tester presented evidence that Melissa had planned Sandra's murder. Surveillance footage showed that Sandra had intended to visit Melissa's house. The prosecutor alleged that Melissa took Sandra to a church where she gave her juice laced with a powerful sedative. Once Sandra was unconscious, Melissa attacked and suffocated her to death. Initially, the prosecutor sought the death penalty against Melissa, as she had not yet pleaded guilty to the crimes. However, during the trial, Melissa made a sudden decision to plead guilty, taking full responsibility for her actions. Before accepting her plea, Judge Linda Luss questioned Melissa to ensure she had discussed the matter with her lawyers and was certain about giving up her right to a jury trial. Melissa confirmed that she was resolute in her decision. Prosecutor Thomas Tester raised concerns about Melissa Huckabee's mental state after Judge Luss finished questioning her. He cited her unusual behavior in prison, including a self-harm incident, which made him question her ability to make rational decisions. Although Melissa seemed coherent in court, Tester worried about her decision-making in the long run. Despite Judge Luss's reassurance, Tester asked Melissa if she understood the situation, likely fearing she might retract her guilty plea. Melissa's admission of guilt marked a significant turning point in the case, bringing some closure to the Cantu family and avoiding a lengthy trial. This crucial moment simplified the legal proceedings and provided the Cantu family with some comfort after Sandra's tragic death. It also paved the way for what would happen next in the case. On June 14, 2010, Melissa Huckabee was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the intentional and premeditated murder of Sandra Cantu. The prosecution alleged 3 special circumstances in this case. Firstly, it was alleged that Huckabee committed the murder while kidnapping Sandra Cantu, a violation of Penal Code Sections 207 and 209. Secondly, it was alleged that Huckabee committed the murder while engaged in another crime. Thirdly, it was alleged that Huckabee committed the murder during or immediately after attempting to commit rape by instrument, a violation of Penal Code Section 289, as defined in Penal Code Section 1.2. The prosecution has warned that any evidence presented at a preliminary hearing may also be used in future probation violation proceedings or discovery requests. Melissa Huckabee is accused of murdering Sandra Cantu and initially faced additional charges for drugging a 7-year-old girl, although these charges were later dropped as part of a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. Melissa has pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder and kidnapping of Sandra Cantu. Her heinous crime against a young girl in Tracy, California shocked the nation, and today the court will determine her punishment. This morning, there will be 2 hearings related to the Sandra Cantu murder case. The first hearing will focus on Melissa's sentencing, followed by a decision on whether to lift the gag order. Our correspondent, Latia Arar, is reporting live from outside the San Joaquin County Courthouse in Stockton, where it promises to be a very busy day. In just 3 hours, Melissa Huckabee will be formally sentenced for the murder and kidnapping of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu. The community and Sandra's family are eager for the proceedings to come to an end. Last month, Melissa pleaded guilty and will likely spend the rest of her life in prison without parole. As part of her plea deal, the rape charge against Melissa was dropped, sparing her from the death penalty. During her sentencing, Melissa expressed remorse and confusion over her actions, directly addressing Sandra's mother. She acknowledged that she couldn't understand her own motivations saying that she wished she could give an explanation for what had happened, and that she still couldn't understand why she had done what she had done. Melissa also apologized, saying that for the pain she had caused, saying sorry wasn't enough, but it was all she could do. She added that since the day Sandra had died, she had had to live with the consequences of her actions, and that for the rest of her life, she would have to live with the responsibility of Sandra's death. Sandra's father expressed his struggle to forgive Melissa, saying that they were supposed to forgive their enemies, but he didn't know what to make of her. He added that nothing that happened that day would change the fact that she had taken the life of an innocent little girl who hadn't even gotten to decide what ice cream to eat. The community was deeply affected by Sandra's tragic death. On April 16, 2019, over 600 people attended her funeral to pay their respects. To honor her memory, volunteers planted a tree and built a new playground at Jacobson Elementary School, and one of her cousins started an annual celebration called Tracy Celebrates Children, which helps local kids get fingerprinted and photographed in case they go missing. The prosecutors believed that Melissa deliberately planned and executed the tragic event, but she never shared her motives, leaving investigators baffled. Melissa's past struggles with depression, difficult history, and self-harm were revealed in documents, but they didn't provide a clear explanation for her actions. Melissa is now serving a life sentence in San Juan County Jail, a constant reminder that serious crimes have serious consequences. While the pain of losing Sandra will never fully heal, her family finds solace in knowing that justice has been served, and her death did not go unanswered. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Agnes Klavina. Agnes Klavina was born on July 8, 1984, in Riga, the capital of Latvia. She was the younger of two daughters, with her sister Greta being only a couple of years older. As a result, the two sisters were extremely close and friendly. Their parents made every effort to provide their daughters with a good education and support their dreams. Agnes developed into a sociable, cheerful, and active individual. She excelled in school, participated in sports, and had many friends. Her future aspirations involved a career in tourism or entertainment, as she loved traveling and organizing leisure activities. With her striking appearance and impressive physique, Agnes consistently received attention and compliments from men. From a young age, Agnes had numerous admirers vying for her attention. Following her graduation from school, she worked in the service industry while taking language courses and studying tourism management. At the age of 20, Agnes relocated from Latvia to the United Kingdom, settling in London. She believed that this move would provide her with greater opportunities to unlock her full potential and showcase her talents. Parents and an older sister were supportive of her decision. After the move, Agnes met Michael Mills, an older man with a good education and a thriving business. He owned a small movie theater and entertainment complex, and was considered successful. Agnes and Michael quickly hit it off and began dating. Michael showered Agnes with expensive gifts, and they traveled together, making plans for their future. They were truly in love and happy, and it seemed like a long and prosperous life awaited them. According to those close to Agnes, this was her first true love. She glowed when she was with Michael and dreamed of becoming his wife. In 2014, Agnes was offered a 3-month contract as an administrator at a popular nightclub in Marbella, Spain. Although this meant a temporary move, Agnes didn't want to pass up the opportunity. Michael couldn't leave his job to go with her, but he didn't oppose her signing the contract. For Agnes, it was a chance to gain experience and potentially develop her career in a new field. Marbella is a renowned and appealing resort on the Mediterranean coast, attracting vacationers from worldwide, particularly affluent individuals seeking entertainment and luxury. It's a popular spot for celebrities, athletes, and business moguls. Agnes, being a sociable person, enjoyed working in such a vibrant environment. Before relocating, she visited her family in Latvia and shared the news about her 3-month employment contract. She also announced her plans to marry Michael after returning to England, which delighted her parents and sister. In late May 2014, Agnes moved to Spain with only the essentials, leaving her lover Michael in London. Despite the distance, they maintained daily communication through phone calls and video chats, keeping each other updated on their lives. Agnes Klavina was active on social media, where she shared daily updates about her life through photos, videos, and stories. As a result, she gained a large following of people who were interested in her activities and work. Her posts made it clear that she lived a busy, exciting life and made the most of every day. When her employment contract ended, Agnes decided to extend her stay in Spain for a few more months. It was the start of the peak tourist season in the resort town, and she saw an opportunity to earn a good income. After discussing her plans with her boyfriend, he gave her his support and promised to visit her for a few days. They had been apart for a long time and were eager to see each other. Agnes quickly found a new job as a hostess at an upscale restaurant and renewed her apartment lease. In September, her boyfriend, Michael, visited her as planned. They spent their time together having fun, making plans for their upcoming wedding, and researching honeymoon destinations. However, their time together was short-lived, as Michael returned to London less than a week later. Agnes was left to work in Spain for another month, after which she intended to visit her relatives in Latvia and then join Michael in England. Unfortunately, these plans were not meant to be fulfilled. On September 6th, Agnes went to the Costa del Sol nightclub with her friends. She had told her fiancé about her plans earlier, and he didn't object. At the club, they took pictures and had a good time, with Agnes posting some photos online that night. People who saw her that night remember Agnes wearing a short dress and carrying a small white handbag. As the night ended, Agnes told her friends she wanted to stay a bit longer and would take a taxi home. Her friends weren't worried because Agnes was responsible and hadn't had much to drink. As her friends left, Agnes was talking to a man who had bought her a cocktail. He seemed to be trying to win her over. After that, Agnes disappeared. Despite being in a crowded nightclub, no one saw her leave or knows where she went. The day after Agnes went missing, she failed to show up at work and her phone was turned off. Concerned colleagues and friends alerted the authorities, but the police were slow to act on their missing persons report. As the evening drew in, Michael, Agnes's worried fiancé, contacted her mother, explaining that he had been unable to reach Agnes all day, which was unprecedented. The following day, Agnes's parents and fiancé attempted to file a missing persons report with the Spanish police. However, they were informed that the report would only be considered if it was made in person. Consequently, Agnes's family and Michael flew to Marbella and filed the report 5 days after her disappearance. The investigation began with a search of Agnes's rented apartment. The property appeared as if Agnes had simply stepped out for a short time, with her belongings, including documents, money, and valuable jewelry, still intact. The fridge was stocked with prepared food, and several outfits were laid out on the bed, suggesting that Agnes had chosen what to wear to the club on her last night out. It was clear that Agnes had not returned to her apartment since leaving with her friends. Agnes's phone was switched off, and she stopped posting on social media. She also wasn't responding to any messages. At this point, the police started investigating her disappearance, but a significant amount of time had already passed. Her friends and family created flyers with her picture and distributed them across the city, asking for help in finding her. The media soon picked up the story, and Agnes's disappearance was featured on TV news and the front pages of local newspapers. The investigation advanced after police analyzed CCTV footage from inside and outside the entertainment venue. Although the files had been deleted, specialists were able to recover them. A parking lot exit camera recording showed Agnes being led out of the club around 6 a.m. by a man, apparently against her will. A closer examination of this footage, the last to show Agnes alive, revealed more disturbing details. A man of large build was leading Agnes, gripping her tightly around the waist. Agnes appeared frightened, attempting to break free several times and speaking emotionally. Despite her struggles, the man persisted, eventually forcing her into a Mercedes A63 with tinted windows in the parking lot. At the moment the large man pushed Agnes into the cabin, another man was already inside, while the first man went to the driver's seat. Agnes managed to open the door and tried to escape, but the doorman, standing next to her, intervened. The driver gestured and spoke, and the doorman pushed Agnes back into the car. The driver then handed the doorman something, likely a cash reward. About 6 minutes after Agnes entered the car, her phone was turned off and never turned back on. The vehicle's movement couldn't be tracked due to a lack of CCTV cameras. It became clear that the men in the cabin were the last to contact Agnes. The case was shrouded in secrecy from the start, with investigators signing non-disclosure agreements and information withheld from the press and Agnes's loved ones. 6 months after the incident, Agnes's relatives were shown footage from the club's cameras, which revealed the identities of the 3 men who had last been in contact with Agnes. The large man who forcibly removed her from the club and pushed her into a car was identified as Wesley Capper, the son of a wealthy and influential British millionaire. Also in the car were Craig Porter, a longtime friend of Capper's with no fixed occupation and a history of police attention, and Sean Usman, a dark-skinned doorman. During interrogation, Porter and Usman both claimed they were innocent, stating that Agnes had entered the car voluntarily. Capper's account was that he and a friend had spotted Agnes, a beautiful blonde, at the club and approached her to strike up a conversation. According to Capper, Agnes was already intoxicated, which contradicts the testimony of her friends. However, when offered a drink, she did not refuse. Capper then suggested continuing the party at his luxurious country house, and Agnes allegedly agreed. Agnes reportedly changed her mind about attending a private party at Wesley's house while already in the car. She asked to be dropped off on a dark stretch of road, saying she would take a taxi home. According to the driver, he dropped her off at the requested location, which had no streetlights or CCTV cameras. However, Craig Porter, another passenger, couldn't confirm or deny this account because he was also heavily intoxicated and didn't recall when Agnes was in the car. Craig claimed he fell asleep shortly after leaving the parking lot and didn't notice Agnes's departure. Sean Usman, the doorman, stated that Agnes was drunk but couldn't say if she entered the car voluntarily. He did confirm that when the car stopped, the blonde woman opened the door and almost fell out. Then, at the driver's request, the doorman slammed the car door shut, burning a substantial tip. When questioned, Usman said he didn't believe Agnes was trying to escape by jumping out of the car while it was moving. He thought she might have accidentally opened the door due to intoxication. He also mentioned that Agnes didn't scream or ask for help. However, footage showed Wesley Capper firmly holding Agnes by the waist and wrist, leading her to the car. Wesley claimed Agnes was dizzy, and he was supporting her to prevent her from falling. Later, investigators discovered another suspicious video taken at Soto Grande in southern Spain's Puerta de la Duquesa port. The video, dated September 10th, 4 days after Agnes's disappearance, showed Wesley, Craig, and 2 other men boarding John Capper's luxury yacht. They were carrying a large, heavy-looking suitcase and a rolled-up carpet. When the company returned to Puerta de la Duquesa port a few days later, they had no luggage. After watching the footage, Capper claimed that he and his friends sailed to Ibiza for fun. According to him, the suitcase contained their belongings, and what investigators thought was a carpet was actually bedding. However, he couldn't explain what happened to it afterward. A thorough search of Wesley's yacht and car yielded nothing, as both had been thoroughly cleaned and dry cleaned, eliminating any DNA evidence. Although a long blonde hair was found in a car's trunk, its origin couldn't be determined because the crucial evidence mysteriously disappeared during the investigation. At the trial, the prosecution revealed another peculiar detail. A few hours after Agnes was in the defendant's car, Capper made multiple calls to emergency services but hung up each time without waiting for an answer, as if he was afraid or unsure of his actions. Capper explained that he was drunk and made the calls randomly. The Clavin family's lawyer believed Agnes had been dead for some time, with her body likely on the seabed in the suitcase brought onto the yacht by the suspects. He also thought the case was intentionally delayed, allowing the suspects to eliminate any incriminating evidence. A year and a half after Agnes vanished, Capper, Porter, and Usman were in court, accused of holding her against her will and forcing her into a car. However, due to insufficient evidence, no additional charges could be brought. They were granted bail and discreetly left the courtroom. Agnes's family was understandably outraged, but the judge stood firm. It wasn't until 2019, nearly 5 years after Agnes's disappearance, that the three men were retried. They maintained their innocence, claiming Agnes had entered the car voluntarily. The prosecutor requested that the doorman, Usman, be considered an accomplice to the crime because he assisted the defendants in driving the victim, Agnes, away from the scene. This charge carried a potential 5-year prison sentence for Usman. In his defense, Usman delivered a passionate speech, claiming he was being targeted due to his skin color and inability to afford a good lawyer, as he sent all his earnings to support his impoverished family in Africa. In contrast, the lawyers for Capper and Porter argued that their clients were only guilty of convincing Agnes to get into the car, not of forcing her to do so. According to their version of events, Agnes was dropped off on the road at her request and was waiting for a cab to go home. They suggested that, while intoxicated and unable to defend herself, Agnes might have been kidnapped and killed by someone else. The judge's verdict shocked and outraged the family of the missing young woman because none of the defendants received significant punishment. Usman was acquitted of all charges, while Capper received a 2-year sentence for taking advantage of Agnes's intoxication to persuade her to get into his car. Porter was sentenced to 6 months for his role in the incident. However, both men received suspended sentences and did not serve any time in prison. Instead, they paid Agnes's family a compensation of 101,000 sterling, which was seen as a paltry sum. Agnes's family was disappointed with the outcome and appealed the decision. It was later revealed that both defendants had broken the law again while awaiting the court's decision. Capper, who was under the influence of alcohol and drugs, hit and killed a woman with his car and fled the scene. Porter and his friend, also intoxicated, stole a car after assaulting its owner. Despite the severity of these new crimes, Capper was only sentenced to probation thanks to his lawyer's effective defense. He paid a substantial amount in compensation to the family of the woman he killed but remained free. Porter was less fortunate this time and did go to jail. In 2021, nearly 7 years after Agnes's disappearance, the main suspect faced punishment. Wesley had spent years living a self-destructive lifestyle, excessively consuming alcohol and illicit substances, which severely impacted his health. He was hospitalized and, after seeming to recover, suddenly suffered a stroke. Capper passed away on July 26, 2021, at the age of 44. Around this time, Agnes's parents submitted another appeal to the court. However, since the suspect was now deceased, prosecution was no longer possible. Despite the Supreme Court's pending decision in this complex case, an unexpected development occurred 9 years later. Although Agnes Clavina's body was never found, she was presumed dead. Later, her family, including her parents, sister, and fiancé, accepted their lawyer's theory that the perpetrators had disposed of Agnes's body in a suitcase, which was then loaded onto a yacht and discarded at sea, making it impossible to recover. Nevertheless, in the summer of 2023, 9 years after Agnes vanished, the case took a surprising turn. In mid-June, a gardener at the elite Lida Golf Club in Costa del Sol discovered a mysterious object while cleaning near the coast. Upon closer inspection, it was an old, damaged suitcase. The gardener did not open it and instead called the police. Authorities found human remains inside the suitcase, later identified as belonging to a young woman aged 25 to 35 at the time of death. Further investigation revealed that the suitcase had been in the water for around 10 years before washing ashore. Based on this information, police suspected that the remains might belong to Agnes Clavina, who went missing 9 years ago. To confirm this, experts are currently conducting DNA tests to compare Agnes's DNA with the remains found. The investigation is ongoing, and details have not been made public. If the suspicions are confirmed, the case will be reopened, and surviving suspects will face trial. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rachel Anderson. Rachel Anderson was born on January 28, 1994, in Warren, Ohio, to parents William, Bill, Rachel and Patricia, Trish, Rachel. She grew up with a younger brother, John, with whom she shared a close family bond. Rachel graduated from Warren Harding High School in 2012, where she excelled academically as a member of the National Honor Society. She was also an active athlete, participating in soccer and volleyball. Despite the unconventional nature of her career aspirations, Rachel had always dreamed of becoming a funeral director since childhood. This passion led her to pursue a degree in mortuary science at Youngstown State University. Her hard work and dedication earned her recognition as one of the top students in her field and secured a scholarship. Following her undergraduate studies, Rachel enrolled in the Cincinnati College of Mortuary Science, graduating in 2016 with a Bachelor of Science in Mortuary Science. She became a member of the Ohio Funeral Directors Association and moved to Columbus, where she completed an internship at Shaw Davis Funeral Home. Rachel approached her work with great respect and saw it as her duty to support and care for families during difficult times. Rachel's internship was nearing its end, and she had high hopes of becoming a permanent employee at the Bureau. On January 26, Rachel Anderson celebrated her 24th birthday. The next day, her brother John visited her from Warren. Before he left to return home on January 28, Rachel gave him the key to her apartment. However, John accidentally took the key with him when he left. Later that day, Rachel realized she had misplaced her key and contacted John Kennedy, who had a spare, to arrange a pickup. After speaking with her mother around 6:30 p.m., Rachel retrieved her key from Kennedy. Since her apartment door could only be locked from the outside with a key, she had to leave it unlocked. Rachel stopped for dinner at her favorite restaurant and arrived home around 7:30 p.m. As she entered her apartment, she was confronted by a man who was waiting for her. He abducted her, taking her to the top floor of the building, where he restrained her using various objects. The man bound Rachel's feet and ankles with a hair dryer cord, tied her hands with a belt and blinds cords, and used a curling iron cord to restrain her wrists. He also gagged her to silence her. A man then forced Rachel to reveal her PIN numbers and subjected her to torture, abuse, and physical harm. Ultimately, he strangled her with a cord from an electric blanket, causing blunt force trauma and the stab wound to her head. After the attack, the man hid Rachel's body in a closet, leaving her partially naked with the electric blanket cord still tied around her neck. He then stole her car and used her bank cards to make purchases at several stores in Columbus. Forensic evidence revealed that bruising and red marks on Rachel's ankles and wrists suggested she was alive when the perpetrator restrained her. A DNA sample was discovered on the rope used to tie her up and on Rachel's body. The coroner's autopsy report concluded that Rachel's death was caused by a stab wound to the head and neck, contradicting the initial theory of strangulation. After interviewing Rachel's co-workers and her ex-boyfriend, who had an alibi, detectives explored alternative explanations for the attack. They returned to Rachel's apartment to search for clues, hoping to identify the perpetrator. During this search, they found Rachel's purse, which was missing her wallet, on the living room floor. 2 weeks later, Rachel's mother discovered the 9-inch steak knife used in the stabbing in a box in the apartment. Detectives initially thought the crime was a robbery, but the brutality and torture inflicted on Rachel suggested that the perpetrator was not just a thief, but a skilled and sadistic individual who took pleasure in exerting power over his victim. The investigators considered various motives but had no suspects and kept the investigation details secret to avoid compromising the case. Later, DNA samples were found on Rachel's body and at the crime scene, but unfortunately, they did not match anyone in the Special Services database. Fortunately, a surveillance video showed 2 people using Rachel's car to drive around the city after her death, and cash was withdrawn from her debit and credit cards. An investigation revealed a crucial lead when a phone number linked to the night of January 28, 2018, at Rachel's apartment was identified. Location data analysis led authorities to the suspect. Anthony Perrin, a 54-year-old convicted offender, was arrested. He had spent 33 years in prison for violent crimes, including rape, robbery, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Anthony Perrin had a turbulent past, beginning with his upbringing by grandparents, then living with his mother. Mental health diagnoses, including conduct disorder and antisocial personality disorder, indicated serious social problems. He entered a youth commission facility at age 14, then transitioned into foster care. At 15, Anthony faced his first charge in 1980 for abusing a young foster brother he babysat. A year later, he threatened his girlfriend's mother with a knife and attempted to drown her before fleeing. In 1982, Anthony Perrin was convicted of crimes in Franklin at 17 and served 24 years. After release in 2006, he moved to Georgia, was charged with forgery in 2007, and spent 9 more years in prison. Released in 2017, he returned to Ohio, required to check in with the sheriff's department every 90 days. On August 21, 2017, Anthony was caught with a woman in his car. 6 days later, he was stopped for driving without a license and found with a knife and shotgun, but wasn't arrested. Later, CCTV footage showed Rachel's car outside a store, with a man getting out of the passenger side. The driver wasn't visible, but police identified the man as Anthony Slits. He was questioned and revealed he was approached by a man who offered him money to cash in his ex-girlfriend's cards. Slits confirmed Anthony's identity and outlined their route on January 28, 2018, when they tried to cash out Rachel's stolen cards. Anthony Perrin remained at large until his capture on February 9, 2018, when he was taken into custody following a multi-day stakeout of his sister's home. Anthony was charged with multiple counts of serious crimes, including burglary, robbery, kidnapping, rape, and murder. Nearly 2 years later, his trial began on February 4, 2020, and 4 witnesses testified on the first day, including Rachel's co-worker Jonathan Kennedy, who was the person who found Rachel. The trial continued with testimony from Jonathan and the manager of the apartment complex where the crime occurred. Officer Frank Ghani, who was parked outside the apartment when the body was discovered, also testified and shared the surveillance footage with the jury. On the same day, Anthony expressed dissatisfaction with his attorneys to the judge and requested new representation. However, it became apparent that Anthony was intentionally delaying the proceedings. The prosecution presented expert witnesses on February 10, including a latent print expert, who explained how technology was used to track the use of Rachel Anderson's debit card and its connection to the crime scene. The defendant's sister also testified, revealing that her brother had given her the debit card, claiming it belonged to his girlfriend. However, after watching news reports, she discovered that the card actually belonged to Rachel. The final day of testimony was February 11th. The medical examiner testified that the defendant's DNA was found at the crime scene. Additionally, a forensic pathologist and a deputy coroner from the Franklin County office provided details about the extent of Rachel Anderson's injuries. During the final hearing on February 12th, Assistant Prosecutor Amy Van Killen presented the state's closing argument, outlining the events of the crime and asserting that Anthony had murdered Rachel Anderson in cold blood. In contrast, defense attorney Larry Thomas acknowledged that Anthony had used Rachel's cards, but argued that he was not responsible for the crime. The defense attorney argued that the prosecution's case lacked concrete evidence, as the DNA and cell phone data did not definitively link Anthony Perrin to the crime. However, after deliberating for approximately 6 hours over 2 days, the jury of 4 men and 8 women found him guilty on all counts. The prosecution pursued the death penalty due to the severity of the crime, which involved the murder of Rachel Anderson during an aggravated burglary. Additionally, Anthony's prior conviction for a similar attempted murder of a woman weighed against him. Prosecutor Bryan stated that some individuals consistently disregard the law, and Anthony Perrin is a prime example. The sentencing phase of the trial began on February 18th. In an attempt to mitigate the sentence, the defense presented evidence of Anthony's troubled childhood, but the prosecution counter-argued that the aggravating circumstances of the case outweighed any mitigating factors. During the trial, it was established that Anthony Perrin was fully aware of his actions when he attacked Rachel. Despite this, several people testified on his behalf, including his mother, sister, a psychologist, and a former teacher. Anthony also addressed the jury, sharing a 13-minute unscripted statement about his troubled past, including an abusive childhood and difficulties after being released from prison. In his statement, Anthony described feeling helpless and claimed that the system had failed him. He blamed the justice system for his current situation but did not directly address the crime or apologize for it. After deliberating for 3.5 hours, the jury was unable to agree on the death penalty and instead recommended life in prison without parole. The sentencing took place on March 16, 2020. Rachel's mother was visibly emotional in court as the verdict was announced. Rachel's father also spoke, expressing his surprise at how Anthony, a repeat offender with a history of violence, was able to make demands and become hysterical during the investigation. The case of Rachel Anderson's murder drew to a close as Anthony Perrin's sentence was handed down. However, what stood out was not the severity of the sentence, but rather the disturbing behavior of one individual, Anthony Perrin himself. As an adult, he shifted the blame away from himself and onto the system, denying any personal responsibility for his heinous actions. Despite his efforts to deflect blame, Anthony received 2 consecutive life sentences without parole, one for aggravated murder and another for violent crimes. In addition, he was given 63 more years for other crimes including burglary, kidnapping, robbery, and various violent offenses. This marked a total sentence of multiple consecutive life terms plus 63 years. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jorge Cortez. Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez was born on January 5, 1978, in Mexico City. He kept his childhood and teenage years private, only sharing that he often clashed with his mother, who cared deeply for him, and his father, who rarely intervened in their arguments. Jorge's strained family relationships likely contributed to his emotional isolation and the development of his aggressive and unstable personality. To escape his difficult home life, Jorge left at a young age and embarked on a journey across Mexico, taking on temporary jobs to support himself. He worked as a waiter in various bars in Mexico City, including those in the Rosa and Cona districts, and also relied on tips from tourists in the popular Villa Du and Cuac districts, known for their extensive infrastructure and diverse entertainment options. Jorge's life of crime began in this place. In 2010, he was arrested for theft and given a 4-year prison sentence. However, because it was his first offense, the judge decided to release him on bail. At the time, no one suspected that this decision would set free a man who would later become one of Mexico's most notorious criminals. After his release, Jorge met a girl named Adriana and fell in love. Initially, he treated her with kindness and attention, but as their relationship deepened, his behavior became increasingly violent. Adriana soon found herself a victim of his physical abuse. Exhausted by his cruelty, she decided to end the relationship, but Jorge refused to accept her decision. One night, Jorge violently attacked Adriana, dragging her down the stairs by her hair and breaking her nose. He beat her so severely that she lost consciousness. When she came to, she saw Jorge holding a lighter and threatening to kill them both if she didn't stay with him. Despite his threats, Adriana continued to resist, which further enraged Jorge. He attempted to strangle her by grabbing her neck with both hands. However, Adriana managed to break free, grabbed a hammer, and began fighting back. She was able to force Jorge out of the apartment and ultimately out of her life for good. This violent confrontation occurred in 2011, and although Adriana reported the incident to the police, Jorge was released on bail and avoided punishment. In hindsight, Adriana's escape from Jorge that night saved her from a potentially deadly situation. Jorge would go on to take the lives of multiple women in the future. After meeting Jorge, 18-year-old Yang Kiang Marie became his new victim. Yang was a Korean girl who was very close to her mother, Monica, and her sisters, particularly Anna. Anna was a lively and athletic young woman who balanced her studies in psychology with a part-time job at a restaurant. Yang met Jorge at one of the bars where he worked, and they were immediately drawn to each other. After a brief courtship, they started dating, but their relationship was marked by violence. Despite their frequent arguments, they stayed together. When Yang turned 19, she decided to declare her independence from her family and move to the city with Jorge. However, this change only made their problems worse. Jorge's behavior became increasingly controlling and abusive. He constantly monitored Yang's activities, calling her every hour at work and restricting her interactions with friends. As a result, Yang felt trapped and realized she was a victim of domestic violence. However, she hid the truth from others, including her family, to avoid causing them concern. Only a few close people, including her sister Anna and some friends, knew about the situation. Despite her family's warnings and advice to leave Jorge, Yang struggled to break free. She attempted to leave him multiple times but always returned, held back by her own fears and vulnerabilities. During this time, Yang underwent a significant transformation, changing from a happy and lively person to someone who was depressed and willing to do anything to please Jorge. The relationship continued to deteriorate, becoming increasingly toxic and damaging to Yang's well-being. Yang's relationship with Jorge was marked by violent outbursts. On one occasion, Jorge refused to let Yang into their apartment when she came home late. On another, he locked her inside, set her clothes on fire, and chased her around the room in a fit of rage. In August 2014, their arguments escalated, and Yang decided to leave Jorge and move in with her parents. A friend encouraged her to report Jorge to the police and end the abuse. Although Yang initially agreed, she eventually returned to Jorge and they continued living together. Tragically, Yang's life was cut short. On September 21st, her body was discovered in their apartment, bearing signs of severe bruising. Jorge claimed to have found Yang hanging in the bedroom, stating that he had left her sleeping at noon the previous day, September 20th, after she had worked a shift at the bar. Jorge claimed that he returned home on the morning of September 21st to find Yang deceased. He immediately contacted the police and notified Yang's family of the tragic event. The news of Yang's death was devastating to her family, prompting Monica and Anna to rush to the scene. Upon arrival, they found police officers and forensic experts already at the apartment, carefully removing Yang's body from the bed. Jorge stated that when he saw his deceased wife, he became frantic and attempted to assist her. A police officer explained to the family that an investigation was ongoing and they needed to stay outside the house to protect potential evidence. As they watched, Yang's body, covered with a sheet, was carried out of the house. The police also informed them that the initial evidence suggested Yang's death was a suicide, a conclusion supported by the position of the body in Jorge's account, which the police believed to be truthful. However, Yang's family was skeptical and struggled to accept this explanation, finding it hard to believe that she would take her own life. When the family arrived to identify the body and prepare the necessary documents, they were surprised to find that the examination protocol was almost complete. The death certificate stated that Yang had died from strangulation by hanging. However, when the relatives were allowed to view the body, they noticed bruises on Yang's legs that seemed suspicious. Jorge attempted to explain the bruises by saying that the body had slipped from his hands and fallen to the floor when he tried to move it from the bed. Monica was not convinced by Jorge's explanation and suspected that something was not quite right. Investigations revealed more about Yang's tumultuous relationship with Jorge, fueling suspicion that her death might not be the suicide police claimed. During police testimony, friends described constant fighting between they, revealing Jorge's history of jealousy and aggression. His behavior extended to frequent phone calls to Yang's workplace, indicating a pattern of controlling behavior. Yang's sister Anna noted that a few months before the tragedy, her behavior dramatically shifted. Anna added that she started distancing herself from the family once the relationship with Jorge started. This prompted concern within the family. Despite growing concerns about Jorge's unstable behavior and doubts about the official explanation, the police were quick to dismiss theories and rushed to close the case. Experts at the Katok morgue recommended cremating Yang's body, which meant that further forensic investigation would not be possible. Yang's mother was deeply suspicious of Jorge's involvement in her daughter's death, but she eventually agreed to the cremation due to pressure from her family, thereby giving up the chance to gather evidence to support her suspicions. Jorge did not attend the funeral, but he got a tattoo of a broken heart, supposedly to show his grief. However, he also cut off all contact with Yang's family. Yang's death had a devastating impact on her family, especially her mother, Monica. The overwhelming pain of losing her daughter, combined with feelings of loneliness and despair, led Monica to develop an addiction to alcohol and smoking. Monica was devastated when her daughter Yang passed away suddenly. Despite her overwhelming grief, Monica refused to accept the initial explanation of Yang's death, finding it contradictory to her daughter's outgoing and life-loving nature. Unsettled by details like the bruises on Yang's body and the lack of evidence supporting the claimed manner of death, Monica's instincts told her there was more to the story. To get answers, Monica launched her own investigation into the case. Monica acquired security footage from her daughter's home, revealing her son-in-law Jorge was the last person to see Yang alive. With the help of a private attorney and forensic pathologist, Monica reviewed Yang's final days. An unexpected development led to a shocking explanation, revealing a deeply seated scandal and a misclassified homicide. Monica's determination uncovered hidden details, ultimately revealing the truth behind Yang's death. The detective completely rejected the initial account of Yang's death, presenting conclusive evidence that proved she was murdered. Further investigation revealed several discrepancies with the original autopsy. There were no signs of hanging on Yang's body, but her neck showed signs of strangulation, and a scarf had been used to make it appear as though she had hanged herself. Bruises on her hands and fingernails suggested she had tried to fight back. The medical examiner confirmed that any competent expert would have reached the same conclusion. This raises serious questions. Why did the police ignore these facts, and why did the family receive a false report about their daughter's death? Monica's relentless pursuit of truth led her to conduct a 7-month investigation, uncovering a series of disturbing failures and incompetence by law enforcement agencies. Her research revealed that Young had previously reported violence by Jorge to the police, but her cries for help were ignored. Monica also discovered that Jorge had ties to his father and the staff handling the case, which, combined with the severity of Yang's injuries and the apparent negligence of the authorities, compelled her to take decisive action. Monica appealed to the prosecutor's office, seeking a review of the case and justice for Jorge, the main suspect. However, she was met with neglect and cynicism instead of support. A prosecutor even questioned her competence, suggesting she should focus on being a housewife and seek psychological help rather than pursuing justice. Undeterred, Monica continued her investigation, driven by her love for her child and her desire for truth. Her perseverance ultimately paid off. Jorge committed another murder in 2016, a devastating end to Yang's story. This event began a new chapter in Campira's life. She met Jorge online, where he hid his dark nature behind a charming facade. Unaware of his past, she was drawn to his friendly, sociable personality, and they soon developed a romantic relationship. Campira's close friends discovered her new relationship when she posted a photo of herself and her boyfriend on social media, beaming with happiness. For several weeks, their romance seemed perfect. As 2016 drew to a close, Campira's mother, Margarita, met Jorge for the first time on December 28. Campira, Jorge, and her children then traveled to Acapulco to spend the New Year's holidays with her parents. However, Jorge later convinced Campira to extend their stay, and she asked her mother to watch the children for a few more days. Margarita agreed, unaware of the tragedy that was about to unfold. 3 days later, Campira was found dead. The last time Margarita had spoken to her daughter was on December 30th. When Margarita tried to call Campira on New Year's Eve, she was met with silence. Campira always answered her phone or returned calls promptly, so Margarita's anxiety grew with each passing minute. As the hours ticked by, Campira's unusual silence and lack of online activity only heightened Margarita's concerns. Eventually, Margarita decided to contact Jorge to find out what had happened to her daughter. Jorge attempted to alleviate Margarita's concerns by downplaying the argument and Campira departure to celebrate the new year with friends. However, Margarita remained unconvinced and asked a family friend to check on Campira. When the friend arrived at Campira's house, Jorge told him that Campira was asleep and unable to meet with him. Margarita's suspicions grew, and she sensed that Jorge was hiding something. On December 31st, between 5 o'clock and 8 p.m., Jorge committed a heinous crime. He brutally murdered Campira by strangling her after beating her severely with an unknown object, leaving multiple injuries on her face and body. In an attempt to make it appear as though Campira had taken her own life, Jorge cut a lock of her hair, placed her body on the bed, covered it with a blanket, and left the gas stove on. He even placed a portrait of Campira's late ex-husband in her hand to create the illusion that memories of him had driven her to suicide. Around 8:30 p.m., Jorge packed his belongings and left the house. On the night of January 1, 2017, Margarita tried to contact her daughter Campira to wish her a happy new year, but was unable to reach her. She then called her son Gabriel, who was in the same city as Campira, and asked him to check on her. When Gabriel arrived at his sister's house, he was immediately hit with a strong smell of gas. After turning off the gas burners, he began searching for Campira and was shocked to find her body on the couch, bearing signs of a brutal beating on her face. As Gabriel threw off the blanket covering his sister's body, he was horrified by what he saw. Campira was wearing only her underwear, and her body was covered in numerous bruises. Several details caught his attention. There were drops of blood around her, although her body in underwear appeared clean, as if she had recently bathed. Additionally, Campira's head was almost completely shaved, which struck Gabriel as strange, as his sister was known to take great care of her hair. Gabriel reported the incident to the police and then called his mother to break the news to Margarita. Paramedics and police arrived, confirmed Campira's death, and restricted access to the scene. The family was stunned by grief, struggling to come to terms with what happened. Their eyes reflected sadness and a glimmer of hope for justice. The investigation was complicated by inconsistencies between the crime scene and the initial assumption of suicide. The police meticulously examined every detail to unravel the truth. The police initially suspected suicide, but Campira's family disputed this, finding it impossible to believe that a young, cheerful woman would take such a drastic step. Campira's family was convinced that her death was not a suicide, but a violent crime. A strand of hair found on her body that did not match anyone in the house reinforced their suspicions. They demanded a more thorough investigation, which was granted. A second forensic examination confirmed their fears, revealing that Campira was strangled and that the suicide scene was staged. The evidence included marks on her trachea and neck, bruises indicating a beating, and the absence of a strand of hair. The police launched an investigation, and Campira's aunt, Sandra, worked with the deputy prosecutor to have the case transferred to the prosecutor's office. However, progress was slow. Later, Sandra was called back to the prosecutor's office and informed that she and her brother, Gabriel, could be plaintiffs in the case. Campira's children were left with their grandmother after the tragedy. To shield them from painful memories, they were transferred to a new school. However, time alone didn't heal their wounds. 2 months later, the family was allowed to visit the apartment where Campira's body was found, collecting her belongings and possibly uncovering clues. Her laptop was found, but its data had been deleted. Fortunately, her iPad was password protected, and the last photos she took before her death were recovered. One disturbing photo showed Campira lying next to Jorge on the same sofa where her body was later found. Further investigation of the photos revealed more evidence. In one image, Jorge was seen holding a skull-shaped container that was later discovered in the apartment's freezer. He was also shown strangling Campira with one hand. Drawers in the desk yielded sketches of tattoos Jorge planned to get, further hinting at his possible involvement in the crime. The public was outraged when Jorge was released on bail in 2009, sparking widespread anger. Many realized that if he had been detained earlier, the young women might still be alive. The Campira and Young families continued to demand justice for their loved ones on social media, gathering over 13,000 supporters on a memorial page. 10 months after his escape, Jorge was finally caught on October 24, 2017. His arrest was unexpected, occurring during a routine patrol by the National Civilian Police in Livingston, Guatemala. The officers were patrolling the streets when they noticed a suspicious man who appeared to be homeless. A routine check of his documents and fingerprints revealed a shocking truth: the man was on the international wanted list with a high danger level. Jorge was immediately arrested and taken to the immigration center in Guatemala City, where he was detained pending further action. The Guatemalan authorities quickly contacted their Mexican counterparts to initiate the extradition process. According to the head of the Guatemalan police, Pablo Castillo, Jorge had been hiding under a bridge in western Guatemala, living on the streets and relying on the kindness of tourists for survival. The next day, October 25, Jorge was transported to the Mexican border city of Chicas, where he was handed over to the Mexican authorities. After crossing the border, Jorge was taken to Mexico City, marking the successful completion of the extradition process and the delivery of justice. Jorge appeared in court to face charges for his alleged crimes. A reporter managed to ask him a few questions, but Jorge responded with a complete denial of any wrongdoing, claiming he was unaware of the charges against him. This was despite being taken to court on October 26 for a preventive measure, specifically for the murder of Campira. During the trial, the prosecution presented strong evidence of Jorge's involvement in the crime. The investigation revealed that Jorge had brutally beaten the victim with an unknown object before strangling her to death. The prosecutor classified the crime as a feminicide, made worse by the fact that Jorge had a romantic relationship with the victim. The prosecutor also pointed out that Jorge had a prior conviction for theft and was possibly involved in the death of another ex-girlfriend, Jan. Despite the overwhelming evidence and arguments against Jorge, his lawyer proposed an alternative explanation that Jorge was mentally unstable and needed a psychological evaluation. This move came as the community awaited justice, expecting a suitable punishment for the perpetrator. After thoroughly examining the evidence, witness testimonies, and arguments, the judge turned his attention to Jorge and his lawyer. He asked how long it would take to complete the psychological evaluation. Following a consultation, Jorge's lawyer agreed that Jorge would attend all subsequent court hearings. Upon reviewing all materials and considering both sides, the judge rendered a verdict. There was sufficient evidence from the prosecutor to hold Jorge accountable for his crimes. The court ordered the investigation to continue and gave a 4-month deadline to gather new evidence. Meanwhile, Jorge was taken into custody and held at a pre-trial detention center. Despite Jorge's arrest and guilty verdict, the Campira and Jan families faced a lengthy and challenging process ahead. In August 2019, an oral hearing was held in Jorge's case. His lawyer asked the court to disregard the videos that showed Jorge entering and leaving Campira's house on the day she was murdered. They claimed that these videos were incomplete, taken from a 30-hour recording at the crime scene, and could not be used to prove Jorge's guilt. The videos had been given to the victim's family by a neighbor who recorded them. The family then passed them on to the police, who brought only partial recordings to court. The police had lost the original disc. Jorge's lawyer alleged that the Mexico City prosecutor's office had concealed this information, which only came to light on the day of the hearing. The defense lawyer argued that the materials used to obtain the arrest warrant were unlawful. Specifically, the lawyer claimed that a key video was given to the Campira family rather than the judicial authorities, and therefore could not be used as evidence. Despite this, the supervisory judge rejected the defense's petition after considering the prosecution's arguments and the testimony of Campira's friends and neighbors. Additionally, the court considered 2 witness statements, but did not accept them as evidence. The case proceeded, and Jorge was allowed to appeal the decision and present the same arguments again. Meanwhile, the Young family was dealing with their own separate case. A ban on violence against women was established in Mexico City, thanks in part to advocacy from several groups, including the Mexican Institute of Human Rights and Democracy and the Center for Justice. This new decree was influenced by multiple high-profile crimes, including the murder of Jan. As a result, her case was forwarded to a Mexico City court for trial. Nearly 7 years after Yang's murder, charges were formally brought against her suspected killer, Jorge, in May 2021. Shortly thereafter, a judge ordered his arrest for his role in her murder. Despite these developments, Jorge's defense team was able to significantly slow down the investigation and prosecution. 9 years after Yang's death, Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez was sentenced to 52 years and 6 months in prison in November 2023 for taking Yang's life. While the Young family has finally received justice, Campira's family still faces a lengthy process. A trial had been scheduled for April 2022 at the detention center where Jorge was being held. Activists were resolute that this time the perpetrator would not evade accountability. Jorge's lawyers have successfully delayed the hearing once again, which was set to take place on January 29, 2024. Over 50 witnesses were expected to be called to testify, but for now, there is no update on the status of the hearing in the media. Jorge's family remains hopeful that he will eventually be held accountable for his actions. While nothing can bring Campira back, they seek justice and want to ensure that her death does not go unpunished. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Abril Perez Sagayan. Abril Perez Sagayan was born in 1971 in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico. Her mother, Maria del Socorro, worked diligently 7 days a week to ensure her 3 children, Abril, Javier, and Ana, had the opportunity for the best possible education and a bright future. Even at a young age, Abril displayed an exceptional aptitude for science and made it her goal to pursue higher education and financial independence. As Abril matured, she embodied a unique combination of intelligence, compassion, and physical beauty. Her sociable nature and innate leadership qualities made her an inspiration to her friends and a standout professional in her field. She earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Nuevo León and a master's degree in business from the Monterrey Institute of Technology. As Abril's career progressed, she discovered her passion for digital sales and rapidly climbed the ranks. She attained a prominent position as an executive director at Bilbao Bank in the United States. During the early 1990s, a time when Abril's professional accomplishments were flourishing, she met Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez. Juan Carlos was an ambitious entrepreneur, born on November 11, 1968. Juan Carlos and Abril discovered they had a lot in common. Both had attended the Monterrey Institute of Science and Technology, where Abril studied and Juan Carlos earned his degree with high academic achievement. Juan Carlos had also studied at top U.S. universities, including the University of Pennsylvania and Harvard. With his education and experience, he considered himself a professional entrepreneur in e-commerce and financial technology. Juan and Abril became inseparable, collaborating on projects and socializing in the same friend circle. As time passed, their friendship blossomed into romance. After a few years of dating, they decided to tie the knot, and their wedding took place in 1994. Their collaboration led to numerous successful projects, including the online stores Pag Mobile and Plascom. They also played a key role in the development of the Dem store, which became a leading e-commerce platform in Mexico. By 1999, their life appeared to be a perfect fairy tale, with both partners achieving great success in their careers and enjoying a happy relationship. Their joy was further amplified with the birth of their first child, Ana Cecilia, in 2001. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Juan Carlos Jr., followed by another son, Julio Andres, in 2005. Despite their busy schedules, Abril prioritized her children's needs, taking care of them personally and attending their school activities. Abril's devotion earned her the respect and admiration of those around her. Juan Carlos was also a dedicated father, and together they created a seemingly ideal family that many people envied. However, behind the facade, the family was struggling with difficulties, and all members suffered due to Juan's short temper. Juan was a cruel man who frequently lashed out at anyone who crossed his path. His behavior towards his wife, Abril, began with verbal abuse, making her feel uncomfortable and hurt with his insulting words. Over time, the situation worsened, and Juan started using physical violence against Abril, regularly beating her. Abril attempted to conceal the abuse from her friends and family, fearing that she wouldn't be able to provide for their children on her own. She believed that staying with Juan would give their children a better future. However, by 2009, the situation had become so severe that others began to suspect what was happening in the family. Abril has always kept it a secret from her friends and family, but whenever they asked about a possible divorce, she insisted that she wouldn't leave Juan. By 2014, Juan had reached the pinnacle of his career, becoming a prominent figure in Amazon's retail industry in Mexico. A year later, when Juan became the director of Amazon in Mexico, the family had to relocate to Mexico City. Abril hoped that the change of scenery would resolve their problems, but unfortunately, the abuse continued. Juan Carlos presented himself as a loving husband and father to the public, but behind closed doors, he was abusive and controlling towards his wife, Abril. He would often post on social media about how much he loved her, but in reality, he was constantly accusing her of cheating and even hired a private investigator to gather evidence. Despite his successful career, which included becoming the director of e-commerce at a multinational company, his marriage was deteriorating. The tension between him and Abril became unbearable, and after a trip to Monterrey to celebrate Christmas with her family, she realized she couldn't stay in the marriage any longer. During the trip, Juan's anger boiled over, and he physically attacked Abril, grabbing her by the neck and strangling her. He had received a photo from the private investigator of Abril with a male colleague, which he mistakenly believed was her lover. In reality, the man was just a coworker. Abril decided not to engage with Juan's accusations and instead filed for divorce on January 4, 2019. They had already separated and planned to inform their children about their impending divorce. However, the situation took a violent turn one early morning. Abril was asleep when she was suddenly struck on the head with a baseball bat by her partner, Juan. Initially disoriented, Abril thought the ceiling had collapsed, but as her vision cleared, she saw Juan standing over her. She attempted to push him away and escape, but he overpowered her, prompting her to scream for help. Their 16-year-old son rushed to his mother's aid, quickly assessing the situation and intervening to prevent Juan from causing further harm. He managed to get Abril away from Juan and escorted her out of the house to seek emergency medical attention for her injuries. After the incident, Juan took to social media to share his side of the story. He made several posts claiming that Abril had been unfaithful, stolen his money, and wasted 26 years of his life. He also alleged that Abril had physically attacked him, stabbing him in the chest with a knife. To support his claims, he attached photos of the knife and what appeared to be bloodstains. One of Juan's friends responded by recording a video asking people to share the information. However, Juan's posts became increasingly bizarre. At one point, he even posted a message claiming that Abril had taken her life, despite being clearly alive. This move remains puzzling to this day. Meanwhile, Abril had been recovering in the hospital. After her discharge, she immediately filed a police report against her husband. The authorities sided with her, granting her custody of their 2 children and ordering Juan to pay 6,000 Mexican pesos, approximately $1,350, in monthly alimony. However, this amount was deemed insufficient to cover the costs of raising their 2 minors. After overcoming her initial fear and financial struggles, Abril began a new chapter in her life, driven by her determination to create a better future for her children. She relocated to Monterrey with her kids, where she attended Juan Carlos' trial and filed for divorce. Reflecting on her traumatic experience and the abuse she suffered, Abril reevaluated her life. She joined a Christian organization that supported families and started working as a divorce counselor. Her ultimate goal was to establish a support system for women who had endured similar abuse, just as she had. As Abril worked towards rebuilding her life, the court proceedings against Juan Carlos continued. 9 months after the attack, Juan was formally charged with attempted murder. The case was then brought to court, where Judge Federico Mask ordered Juan's informal arrest. Consequently, Juan was incarcerated for several weeks. Juan appealed the verdict, and on November 3, 2019, Judge Hector Jimenez reviewed the case. He found the hospital photographs and Abril's testimony, along with that of her son, insufficient to prove Juan's guilt. The judge also believed that if Juan had intended to kill Abril, he would have done so. Additionally, He considered the baseball bat used in the attack to be a blunt object rather than a deadly weapon. As a result, the charges were downgraded and the preliminary arrest was cancelled. With only a few hearings remaining, the outcome of the case was uncertain, causing Abril and her loved one significant anxiety and frustration. In a desperate attempt to have her concerns heard, Abril wrote to the judge, expressing her fears for her life and pleading for him to consider the threat Juan posed. However, her letter was ignored. Juan then began a custody battle for their children. Abril was forced to leave Monterrey and travel to Mexico City for the remaining hearings. She also had to subject her children to psychological evaluations, as Juan had claimed in his lawsuit that Abril had manipulated them into rejecting him. A week before a critical court hearing, Abril sat down with her 3 children to express her love and wishes for their future. She encouraged them to chase their dreams and find the strength to forgive their father. This conversation seemed like a farewell, as if Abril sensed that it might be her last opportunity to reassure her children of her love. On November 25, 2019, Abril followed her ex-husband's instructions to avoid potential legal issues that could have led to her separation from her children. She traveled to Mexico City, coincidentally on the same day that thousands of women marched in the streets to commemorate the International Day Against Gender-Based Violence on March 19, 2021. The court reclassified a case involving violence against Abril, which occurred in January 2019, as attempted murder. This decision was made after Abril's relatives and the prosecutor filed several petitions for judicial review, ultimately leading to the cancellation of the original decision. 2 months later, on May 23, the remaining suspects in Abril's murder case were apprehended, including 3 women and 1 man. The investigation resulted in the issuance of 3 search warrants and 8 arrest warrants. During the first search, 48-year-old Amanda Vicente Rodriguez was taken into custody. A series of arrests were made in connection with a recent crime. In the Jardín de Morelos colony, 34-year-old Mabel Montelier Morena and 48-year-old Garcia Alicia Flores Valdez were taken into custody, and their mobile phones were seized. Another arrest was made in the Alvar Aragon colony in Mexico City, where 50-year-old Isa Jalil Castillo, also known as Aguirre or Alvar's godmother, was detained. At the same time, 9 gang members were apprehended, with 7 of them allegedly linked to the Abril case. However, one suspect, Juan Carlos, remained at large, prompting authorities to reissue a warrant for his arrest. General Prosecutor Ernesto Godoy explained that the initial warrant was for attempted murder, while the new one was for the actual killing of a woman. Despite efforts to locate Juan, he remained elusive. In a surprising turn of events, a man named Rolf, also known as El Chalón, contacted the authorities and claimed to have information about the case. During questioning, he revealed that he was the one who had actually pulled the trigger and taken Abril's life. The perpetrator, Rodolfo Daniel Bendis, eventually pleaded guilty to the crime. He claimed that Juan Carlos had promised to pay him $10,000 to carry out the crime. According to Bendis, Juan Carlos had contacted him while he was in pre-trial detention and provided him with the address of Abril in Mexico City. Juan Carlos allegedly instructed Bendis to spy on Abril and provided written instructions on how to commit the crime. He also promised to provide Bendis with a gun in Monterrey. However, when Bendis arrived in Monterrey, no one contacted him, and he did not receive the gun. He returned to Mexico City and did not hear from Juan Carlos again until after his release from prison. Upon his release, Juan Carlos contacted Bendis again and informed him that the plan had changed. He now wanted Abril to be killed in Mexico City, as he had managed to lure her there. The case was divided into multiple hearings due to the complexity of the judicial system. The first trial began in August 2022, with Bendis and Juan Carlos as the initial defendants. During this trial, the prosecution presented 28 witness statements and 14 pieces of expert evidence. During the recent trial, A key defendant known as El Shang Galan testified about his role in planning and committing the crime of feminicide, for which he had previously pleaded guilty. On May 19, 2023, the court delivered its verdict, finding Rodolfo Danielo Baza and Juan Carlos Rodriguez guilty and sentencing them to 52 years in prison. Additionally, they were ordered to pay approximately 56,000 Mexican pesos, $30,000 US, in damages. Following the trial, the men were taken to a detention center to begin serving their sentences. However, the Abril family immediately announced their intention to appeal the verdict, as they believed the sentence was too lenient. They pointed out that Rodolfo was the one who fired the fatal shots. As for the remaining defendants, it was previously decided in October 2014 that their trials would be divided. This decision was met with an appeal from prosecutors, who argued that it would significantly delay the proceedings and result in unnecessary additional costs for the court. The tragic case of Abril continues to affect her family and the wider Mexican society, and despite the recent verdict, the trials are not yet over. After the court hearing, Abril got into a car with her children and their lawyer. She asked the lawyer to drive them to the airport for their flight back to Monterrey. En route, they stopped at an intersection, where a motorcyclist pulled up beside them. The motorcyclist, who was actually a hired assassin, shot Abril multiple times in the head. Luckily, her children, who were seated in the back, escaped serious harm. One child, who was lying down, was grazed by a bullet but suffered only minor injury. Abril was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life. Despite their efforts, she succumbed to her injuries 6 hours later. The lawyer immediately contacted Abril's family to inform them of the tragedy. Her brother Javier traveled to Mexico City to handle the aftermath of the incident. The community suspected Juan Carlos of being involved in the crime, but the authorities took a different stance. Since the shooter's identity and motives were unknown, they couldn't classify the case as femicide and make an arrest. Instead, the case was initially treated as a murder, and the police launched an investigation to gather evidence that could potentially prove it was a femicide. Abril's friend took to social media to accuse Juan Carlos, but her account was deleted as a result. Abril's family was fearful that the perpetrator would go unpunished and sought to raise public awareness about the case through social media. The fact that Abril died on a day dedicated to fighting gender-based violence added a deeper significance to her death. The family organized protests and marches to demand justice for Abril. Following Abril's tragic death, social media erupted in outrage as people realized that she had repeatedly expressed her fear of her abuser, only to be ignored by the authorities. Her family and friends held a funeral mass at the Benito Flores Chapel in Monterrey, where dozens gathered to pay their respects and demand justice for Abril. The funeral procession then proceeded to the Pantheon Garden in Los Angeles, where Abril was laid to rest. Her case has sparked widespread attention to the issue of gender-based violence, particularly in cases where judges release men who have attacked women. Abril's ex-husband, Juan Carlos, was released from prison after appealing his sentence, and was able to track Abril down to Mexico City, where he ultimately took her life. In response to Abril's case, the Mexican General Prosecutor's Office has launched an investigation into the judges who allowed Juan Carlos to be released from prison. The judges in question, Carlos Trillo Rodriguez, Federico Mosa Gonzalez, and Hector Jimenez Lopez, are being investigated for their roles in Juan Carlos' release. Additionally, representatives of the party of former Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador are calling for Judge Mosa's removal from office, citing his involvement in a previous controversial case in which he released a doctor who had disrespected a patient in a public hospital. The judge initially declined to charge Juan Carlos with femicide, instead only charging him with sexual violence, after which he was released from custody. During the public outcry surrounding the Abril case, Rafael Guerra, the president of the Supreme Court of Mexico City, suspended all judges involved in the case on November 29. Mexico City's head of government, Claudia Sheinbaum, stated that the government would investigate Abril's death. She also warned that the judges involved in the case could be held accountable for Abril's death if it was proven that Juan Carlos was responsible. Local and international media reported that Juan Carlos was released despite evidence against him. Abril's family established a non-profit organization called The Voice of Abril to provide support to victims of violence, including information, psychological assistance, and legal aid. The public demonstrations sparked by Abril's death prompted the prosecutor's office to reclassify the case against Juan Carlos, seeking to prosecute him for attempted murder, which could result in his imprisonment. After being charged, Juan Carlos took to social media to claim that he wanted justice for the crime against Abril and that the perpetrator should be punished. He also stated that he was willing to cooperate with the police, despite having a troubled marriage with Abril, and he would never have wanted her to meet such a tragic end. However, his post sparked widespread discontent among the community. His 18-year-old daughter, Ana Cecilia, publicly spoke out against her father, accusing him of physically and mentally abusing her, her siblings, and Abril over the years. She shared disturbing photos of Abril's injuries after being attacked with a baseball bat. Ana described her father as a narcissistic sociopath who allegedly bribed his way out of prison. During the ongoing investigation and protests, an arrest warrant was issued for Juan Carlos, but it was not directly related to the Abril case. Instead, it was due to him violating judicial duties. Although he was released on the condition that he would check in with the police station weekly, he failed to do so. After missing 2 court hearings, Judge Agustin Monra Gaspar Canal was left with no choice but to issue the order. Juan wrote a letter claiming he feared for his life and did not want to attend the hearings, stating he and his family had received death threats since Abril's death. He believed someone would seek revenge if he appeared in court. However, the judge rejected this excuse and issued an arrest warrant, also restricting Juan from leaving the country. The investigation continued, aiming to uncover the truth. A letter from Juan was discovered, in which he again denied involvement in Abril's death, claiming he never intended to harm her. He described the night of the incident, stating that Abril had initiated a fight, stabbing him in the side, and he had hit her with a bat in self-defense. The letter sparked outrage among those who heard it, with no one believing Juan's account. The investigation has revealed that Juan Carlos is the primary suspect in the case. Further investigation by the police has identified at least 7 other individuals involved in the crime against Abril. This conclusion was reached after reviewing surveillance footage from the area where the events occurred. The footage shows 2 cars following Abril as she left the courthouse. The drivers of these cars were in contact with the perpetrator who fatally shot Abril. After the attack, the perpetrator and their cars fled the scene. Although the identities of the pursuers were not yet known at the time, the investigation suggested that Juan Carlos may have been involved in the crime. According to investigators, Juan Carlos likely met these individuals while he was in prison and paid one of them to protect him. After his associates were released from prison, Juan Carlos was also released. He then paid them to kill Abril. Notably, Juan Carlos was the only one who knew Abril's route to Mexico City, as he had requested to meet her. After the shocking details of the case became public, no law firm was willing to defend the suspect, Juan Carlos. Meanwhile, Abril's loved ones and colleagues cooperated fully with law enforcement, providing any information that could aid in his capture. However, sources from the General Prosecutor's Office soon revealed that Juan Carlos had managed to flee Mexico by crossing the border into the United States. Mexican authorities swiftly alerted Interpol, which launched a global manhunt for Juan Carlos. As a result, he became a wanted man in over 151 countries, with authorities determined to apprehend him at all costs. By the end of January 2024, the case had gone cold, with no new leads or updates. For years have passed since Abril's tragic death, yet the true perpetrators remain unpunished. Her children are now living with her family on the outskirts of Mexico City, holding on to the hope that justice will eventually be served. The question on everyone's mind remains, where is Juan Carlos? His capture is still the top priority for the authorities. Abril's family has vowed to continue fighting for justice until Juan Carlos is found and brought to justice. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jessica Paget. Jessica was born on December 15, 1980, in Pennsylvania, where she spent her entire life. As a child, she was energetic and cheerful. However, her parents, Thomas and Danelle, divorced when she was young. Her mother later remarried, and Jessica formed a close bond with her stepfather, whom she considered her second father. After graduating from high school in 1998, Jessica attended college to study preschool education. It was during this time that she met her future husband, Michael Paget. They began dating, moved in together, and had 2 children over the course of their 8-year relationship. Although they didn't get married until August 2014, Michael was a caring father and husband. However, like any family, they experienced ups and downs in their relationship. Jessica was happy with Michael, but just 4 months after their wedding, she vanished. Before her disappearance, Jessica worked at a kindergarten in Northampton for 2 years. She loved her job, as she was passionate about working with children and had a natural ability to connect with them. The children adored her, and she enjoyed spending time with them. On November 21, 2014, Jessica dropped off her older children at school and then headed to work with her younger son, who attended the same kindergarten. It was a typical day, with no indication of the trouble that was to come. Jessica asked her administrator if she could take a short break from work to send a fax to her mother's house in a rural area near Northampton. The administrator agreed, and Jessica left her son at kindergarten before driving to her mother's house. She was expected to return to work within 30 minutes, but an hour passed and she didn't come back. Her colleagues tried calling her, but she didn't answer. When Jessica failed to return, the kindergarten administrator contacted her husband, Michael, to ask if he knew where she was. Michael said he was at work and hadn't heard from her. He tried calling her, but all his calls went straight to voicemail, which was unusual for Jessica as she always answered calls from her family. Michael then called his mother-in-law, Danelle, who was in Florida, to see if Jessica had contacted her. However, Danelle hadn't heard from her daughter all day and was immediately worried. She suggested that Michael call her husband, Greg, who was Jessica's stepfather, to see if he had any information. However, Greg reported that he hadn't seen or spoken to Jessica that day. As the minutes ticked by, Jessica's relatives grew increasingly worried. After numerous failed attempts to contact her, Danelle took a flight to Pennsylvania to search for her daughter. Meanwhile, for hours after Jessica disappeared from work, her husband Michael reported her missing to the police. He expressed his concern that Jessica would never leave their children voluntarily, leading him to fear the worst. The police promptly launched an investigation, distributing Jessica's description to all nearby stations. She was described as 5 feet 4 inches tall, weighing 130 pounds, with a footprint tattoo on her shoulder, brown hair, and hazel eyes. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing gray sweatpants and a black hoodie with the words "Duck, Duck, Goose" on the front and "Staff" on the back. A thorough search of local hospitals and morgues yielded no results. Detectives worked to determine Jessica's whereabouts, interviewing her co-workers in the process. However, everyone they spoke to reported that Jessica had no enemies and was well liked by her colleagues, children, and their parents. According to her co-workers, Jessica seemed fine when she left work at lunchtime, and they noticed nothing unusual about her behavior. 2 hours after Michael reported his wife Jessica missing, the police were able to locate her phone signal, which indicated that it was approximately 1 mile from the kindergarten where she worked. Although the data was not entirely accurate due to inherent location determination errors, it provided a general area for the police to focus their search. However, by the time they began searching, it was already nighttime. The police found Jessica's car, a white Subaru Outback, in a nearby parking lot. The vehicle was unlocked and empty, with her purse, documents, and bank cards still inside. The keys were in the ignition, and her phone was on the passenger seat next to her purse. There were no signs of a crime in the car, leaving the police with several unanswered questions. Where was Jessica, and what had caused her to abandon her car and valuables so close to her workplace? To answer these questions, the police sought CCTV footage. A camera on the back wall of a store across the street had captured the area where Jessica's car was found. After reviewing the footage with the store manager, the police saw Jessica driving into the parking lot at around 1 p.m. She got out of the car and stood by the driver's door for a short time before leaving and not returning. The investigators were baffled by Jessica's disappearance, as she had left behind her documents, phone, and keys. It was unclear whether she had intentionally gone into hiding. Surveillance footage showed Jessica walking between 2 buildings towards another parking lot, where she vanished from view due to the lack of cameras. To get a better look at the footage, the investigators made a copy of the video to review on a larger screen at the police station. The Northampton Police Department, being a small force, enlisted the help of the Pennsylvania State Police to coordinate a search effort. Flyers with Jessica's photo were distributed throughout Northampton and surrounding cities, as well as shared on social media and through local news outlets. State police detectives began reconstructing the events leading up to Jessica's disappearance. They started by re-interviewing the kindergarten staff, who revealed that Jessica had left work to send a fax from her mother's house. The detectives then visited the house, which was approximately 4 miles from the kindergarten, in search of answers. The detectives met with Danelle and her husband Greg at the scene and learned that Jessica had keys to their home and could visit at any time. On the day of her disappearance, both Danelle and Greg had been out, Danelle in Florida and Greg elsewhere, which left uncertainty about Jessica's activities at the house. They also checked Greg's fax machine for records of usage, but found that the device was faulty, which didn't provide any clear information. Jessica might have used another fax machine, but it still didn't explain why she had left her belongings in her car. The detectives decided to speak with Jessica's husband Michael, as husbands are often suspects in such cases. To confirm Michael's story that he was the first to leave the house on the day Jessica disappeared, detectives investigated his claim. It was a possibility they couldn't rule out, as statistically, a significant number of disappearances involve a partner. As they continued the investigation, the police arranged a search party, and local media alerted the public about Jessica's disappearance. Anyone with information was asked to come forward. By this point, 48 hours had passed, but no new leads emerged on Jessica's journey to her mother's house. To aid in their investigation, detectives scoured the route to her mother's house for surveillance cameras. One key location, an Exxon gas station adjacent to the main road leading to the mother's residence, had multiple cameras installed. Given the fact that this gas station was strategically situated on Jessica's stated route, the police logically inferred that if Jessica drove in the direction she said, she would be captured on camera. A review of the recording showed that her car was, indeed, captured driving by at approximately 12:56 p.m. From there, the journey to her mother's house took just a few minutes, suggesting Jessica would need to make the short trip back in order to utilize a functional fax machine, which wasn't operational at her mother's home. While fast-forwarding the tape to find a shot of the vehicle's potential return, detectives made a perplexing observation. The footage shows Jessica's white car speeding through a gas station just 14 minutes later. Notably, the car took a peculiar route, turning towards the gas station and continuing onto the other side without stopping, before heading towards the city center, where the car was later abandoned in a parking lot. Given her rapid pace, the likely reason for this unusual detour was a red traffic light at the intersection, which Jessica may have attempted to avoid by cutting through the gas station. From there, she drove onto a different road where the light was green and eventually left her car in the parking lot, where a police officer discovered it later. However, a surprising detail emerged upon closer inspection of the footage. Jessica, who was 5 feet 4 inches tall and 130 pounds, appeared to be much shorter and lighter than the person seen exiting her car. Measuring against the known height of the car, experts estimated that this person stood between 5 feet 11 inches and 6 feet 3 inches tall. Moreover, during their examination of the abandoned car, the police noticed that the driver's seat was pushed forward, which would make it uncomfortable for someone taller than 5 feet 11 inches to operate the vehicle comfortably. The police initially found it suspicious that the driver's seat was positioned for someone of Jessica's height. However, after reviewing the footage, they discovered that the person who got out of the car had adjusted the seat to its most forward position, attempting to make it seem like Jessica was driving. But this raised another question: who was the tall person seen in the footage? Michael, he, stood at around 6 feet tall. The police brought him in for questioning, and he denied any involvement in his wife's disappearance, claiming he was at work when the kindergarten staff called him. Detectives verified his alibi by interviewing his colleagues and tracking the geolocation of his phone on the day of Jessica's disappearance. The evidence confirmed that Michael was indeed at work at the time, which meant the person in the footage was not him. For days had passed since Jessica's disappearance, and her children were struggling to cope with the stress and uncertainty. Despite the ongoing search efforts, no leads had been found. Investigators re-examined the footage of someone exiting Jessica's car, but the person's identity remained a mystery. However, upon closer inspection, the officers noticed a detail they had previously missed. A minute after the unknown person disappeared from view, a white SUV, likely a Ford, left the scene. This new information led the police to Greg, Jessica's stepfather, who matched the suspect's height description and owned a similar vehicle. The police requested that Greg come to the station for questioning, leaving him shocked and dismayed to be considered a suspect in his stepdaughter's disappearance. Greg claimed that he had left his car at a service center for repairs and that a neighbor had given him a ride there to pick it up. He then stated that he had stopped at an Exxon gas station to grab a bite to eat. However, the police obtained CCTV footage from the gas station, which showed Greg driving past the station just 2 minutes after leaving the service center. It turned out that Greg had lied about stopping at the gas station. Further investigation revealed that Greg's entire story was fabricated. His neighbor denied driving him to the service center, contradicting Greg's claim. This led detectives to suspect that Greg might have been involved in Jessica's disappearance. By piecing together the evidence, investigators concluded that Greg was likely at home when Jessica arrived. It's possible that something happened, and Greg drove Jessica's car to a parking lot in the city center. The police searched Greg's house, where they found evidence that contradicted his alibi. The fax machine, which Greg claimed was not working, was found to be functional, and its usage history showed that Jessica had indeed sent a fax from the house on the day of her disappearance. Furthermore, a trash can in the basement contained napkins with bloodstains, and Greg's shoes, which were found in a dumpster on the street, had dried blood on them. Donnell reported to the police that Greg had requested an early trash pickup the day before, which seemed unusual at the time, especially since the trash can wasn't full. In hindsight, this could be how Greg disposed of evidence related to cleaning products and rags used in the house. During a second interrogation, the police confronted Greg, stating that they knew his previous statements were false and that they had found evidence in his home. They also informed him that they were aware Jessica had been at his house on the day she disappeared. Greg then began to talk. Greg claimed that when he returned home on the afternoon of November 21st, he found Jessica's car in the driveway and bloodstains on the carpet. He alleged that Jessica was already dead when he arrived and that he panicked, fearing no one would believe him. He supposedly drove Jessica's car to a city center parking lot and then returned home. Greg also stated that Jessica had outstanding debts, which he claimed led to her death. However, detectives later discovered that this was another lie, and they found evidence that Greg had purchased adult toys the day before Jessica disappeared. The investigators were fed up with Greg's inconsistent stories, so they directly asked him where he had hidden his stepdaughter Jessica's body, explaining that an autopsy would provide answers to many questions. Realizing he was caught, Greg changed his story again. This time, he claimed he was at home watching adult videos when Jessica arrived and asked to send a fax. According to Greg, he was standing behind her as she used the computer, and he became aroused and developed a desire for his stepdaughter. Without saying a word, he allegedly pulled out a gun and shot her in the back of the head. Then, he moved Jessica's body to the bedroom. Greg then drove Jessica's car to a parking lot in the city center, where he had previously left his Ford for repairs. To mislead investigators, he adjusted the seat to make it appear as though Jessica was driving. What Greg said next shocked the investigators. After returning home, he set up a video camera near the bed and recorded a video of himself with Jessica's body. The police later found this disturbing video on Greg's computer. Greg confessed to wrapping his stepdaughter Jessica's body in a blanket and hiding it in a ravine near his home. He claimed he was not a bad person, but had lost control. After the crime, Greg's life fell apart. He lost his business, home, dogs, and wife. However, he never mentioned the loss of Jessica. Jessica's mother, Danelle, was shocked to discover that her daughter was dead and that her husband was responsible. The authorities announced Jessica's death, stating that she was a victim of homicide. The district attorney, John Morganelli, expressed skepticism about Greg's version of events, but believed there was a sexual motive behind the crime. The prosecutor's office examined the evidence to determine if Greg had planned the attack. Jessica's family released a statement thanking law enforcement, the media, and the public for their efforts. They described Jessica as a beautiful and vibrant young woman who was loved by her family and friends, and stated that her loss made the world a darker place. Gregory Gregg, 53, was charged with the murder of Jessica Padette. Initially, investigators suspected that Greg had tried to persuade Jessica into a romantic encounter, but when she refused, he killed her to avoid exposure. However, this theory was difficult to prove due to the lack of defensive wounds on Jessica's body. She died from a single wound to the back of her head, which corroborated Greg's testimony. Under Pennsylvania law, Greg could have faced the death penalty, but since Jessica was already dead when he committed the second part of the crime, the prosecution could not pursue the death penalty. An examination of Greg and Jessica's computers and phones revealed no evidence of a relationship beyond that of stepfather and stepdaughter. The trial began in 2015. District Attorney John Morganelli noted that Greg's lawyer, John McMahon Jr., failed to submit the results of a mental health evaluation for Greg. McMahon claimed that he had Greg evaluated for a possible insanity defense, but the evaluation found that Greg did not have a diminished mental capacity, so McMahon did not use it in the trial. During the trial, the jury was forced to watch a disturbing 6-minute video that Greg had recorded, which showed him committing heinous crimes using adult toys he had purchased the day before. The jury was reluctant to view the video, but the judge ruled that they were obligated to watch it before reaching a verdict. Greg's lawyer argued that the crime was not premeditated and that his client should be charged with a third-degree crime rather than a first-degree crime. In response, Northampton County District Attorney John Morganelli presented the video as evidence to prove that the crime was, in fact, premeditated. Morganelli explained that this was necessary to convince the jurors of Greg's guilt, despite the disturbing nature of the footage. The jury delivered a unanimous verdict in just 6 minutes, finding Greg guilty of taking Jessica's life and desecrating her body. As a result, the court sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. When asked by the judge if he had any final words, Greg simply replied, "No, sir. I'm just very sorry." Following the sentencing, the judge advised the jurors to seek counseling from a psychologist to cope with the traumatic case. Jessica's husband, Michael, spoke to reporters, expressing the difficulty of moving on without his beloved wife and raising their 3 children alone. He described Jessica as the most wonderful person he had ever met. In a separate matter, Danelle, Greg's wife, has initiated divorce proceedings. However, the process is proving to be complex and Greg is hindering her efforts.